Will, do you want to make some introductory remarks there?
Yes, give me 1 second to put the recording on the website for the live stream. So welcome everyone. If this is your first time joining us, you'll notice that you're muted and you're going to remain muted throughout the duration of the meeting. And you're unable to unmute yourself. Everyone will be muted except for the committee co-chairs, Chuck and Craig, and any presenters who are making presentations. Following each agenda item or each presentation, the co-chairs will call on members of the public who wish to speak. You can participate by going to the reactions icon and pressing the raise hand button, not the wave or the thumbs up. Those will disappear. Only press the button once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're calling in from the phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once the co-chairs call on you. If you're having problems, the chat is available for technical support only to help with Zoom software problems. It is not to ask questions or make comments to the co-chairs or presenters. They will never see those chats. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you'll need to go to the participants section where you'll find the raise hand feature there. And finally, we ask you to not raise your actual hand or wave at the screen because we will not be able to see you. There's a lot of folks in the room. So if you're having problems, just chat me. I'm here to support. And with that, I'll hand it back over to our co-chairs and then get the meeting started.
Thank you. This is Chuck Warren, co-chair of the Transportation Committee. And I'd like to welcome you to our meeting, February meeting. And my other co-chair is Craig Lader. And our first item, which you want to get started on right away, is the continued discussion of bike registration and license plates. And we have Brian Best from Senator Felder's office, who has legislation pending on this subject. And Brian's here to talk about his bill and take some questions, but he has limited time and he has only until 7 o'clock. So I'll turn it over to Brian and we'll see if we come any questions we can fit in there.
Hi, thanks. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Senator Felder's legislative director. I helped draft the bill. It was all Senator Felder's idea. I'm just kind of here for the technical expertise. Happy to answer any questions I can to be of assistance.
Why don't you talk a little bit, Brian, just sort of explain what the bill does, give a short explanation for people who might not in front of them.
Understood. So Senator Felder has a couple bills, but from what I could tell, the kind of two that you're most interested in are license plates for bicycles, e-bikes, and e-scooters. So all the bills that we have kind of treat those all in the same vein. So those, when I talk about these bills, I'm talking about all three, bikes, e-bikes, and e-scooters. So it would require them to have license plates is one bill. It would require anyone riding any of these to have a license. And in order to get this license, you have to know the rules of the road. And it's kind of envisioned that you would do like a driver's ed type test before you got your license. And those are kind of the two main bills. He's got a couple others about having everyone required to wear a helmet. Yeah, that's kind of the other big one.
Okay. Is there a charge for this license? Does he specify any charge in it at all?
So we wrote it in to be as nominal as possible. Whatever the department needs to make this happen, that's what the cost is, but the point is not to raise money. That's very much not my boss's viewpoint. He does not like to, put any more fees on anyone that he wants to. So we don't set a fee, but we say whatever it costs to do this, like that's what the fee is. So we're not a penny more.
Thank you. Why don't we see if there's anyone from the public that would like to comment on this bill first, and then we'll take comments from the board, or questions, basically. But try to keep them succinct so we can get as many questions and comments as possible, because I said Brian has to leave at 7 o'clock. So I guess we have Dylan Geronimo Kennedy. Why don't we unmute Dylan?
Dylan, go ahead. You can unmute.
Hi, just checking. Can everyone hear and see me?
Yeah,
Hear but not see, but go ahead.
We can't see you, but we hear you.
All right, something's wrong with my webcam. But anyway, my question is about for people who do rideshare, because I am a infrequent city biker. It's not something I do all the time, but I'm not quite sure how a license plate would work for this. Would it be just assigned to the city bike, or would I need to carry around a license plate and swap it on every time I got onto a city bike?
Brian,
Good question. It would be assigned to the bike. I would envision it being similar to, I think car sharing is a thing. It would be like a car share. The license plate is attached to the car. So it would be on the bike all the time for that specific bike is how it's envisioned. I guess the one thing I didn't maybe mention was that, what we did with these legislation is I went into the vehicle and traffic law and just grabbed what they say for cars and just put bicycle, e-bike, and e-scooter in. Like, that's what I did. So, most questions will be, whatever is true for cars are going to be true for bikes under these bills.
okay, thank you. Next person, member of the public, is Catherine Nessel. Can we unmute Catherine?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine. I live in Yorkville, but I study at Columbia University. So I use City Bike every time I go up to campus. I think that I take large issue with treating bicycles like motor vehicles, because from a public safety point of view, the bicyclists are the one at danger compared to motor vehicles where drivers are the ones putting others at danger. Looking at statistics from 2006 to 2020, in New York City, only 10 pedestrians were killed by bicycles, but 2,116 were killed by motor vehicles. So given that discrepancy, it doesn't make any sense in my view to treat bikes the same way as cars, given that they're a lot lighter and they're just physics-wise very different. And it's really it's not an issue in our city. It just seems like creating a problem where there isn't one and just complicating efforts for biking. And it's discouraging people from getting on bikes, which is something that we really need to address the climate crisis, to address transportation equity. It just seems like there's no reason that this is needed at all. And having like a test isn't necessary, given that, bicyclists aren't the ones who are making our streets dangerous. It's cars and all of the traffic fatality and traffic violence that has been happening. Like, 2021 had a large spike in traffic violence fueled by cars. So just as a bicyclist who uses that as a form of transportation, I think that we shouldn't be complicating such an environmentally friendly, equitable form of transportation that really doesn't pose fatal risk to pedestrians in the way that cars do. And I would ask the senator's representative why you would just, as you put it, copy and paste the regulations for cars for bikes, given that they pose very little risk to pedestrians. Like in 2020, 0 people were killed by bikes when it was 100 by cars.
So I guess, when we drafted this, it wasn't, certainly we are concerned with pedestrians, but we see this as an opportunity to educate bikers as well about their dangers, their responsibilities on the road. When the more people that are educated on the rules of the road protect everyone. Certainly it'll protect pedestrians, but it would protect bikers as well. I know I don't live in Manhattan. I live in upstate New York. It's very suburban, just like you would picture. And for me, it always amazes me how often people like run stop signs, red lights on bikes, and I don't think it's on purpose. It seems to me it's more of a, that if you're not sure the rules of the road, you're going to not follow them, and that becomes dangerous not only for the bikers, for the vehicles, and obviously pedestrians as well. So we're kind of see this as a whole approach to make everyone safer, not just pedestrians, but although that is important.
Thank you. Okay, next member of the public is Boaz Galil. Can we unmute Boaz? Song there. Go ahead.
One, where can I read about the bill? I mean, if you can put in the chat like a link of the draft. I couldn't find it in the minutes on the agenda. The second, how much do you think it will cost to get the license? And is there going to be like a age, minimum age, and what are we talking about? Thank you.
I don't have a number for the cost. I would hope it would be super minimal, like $5, $10. I mean, whatever it does to produce a card. I mean, we wrote the bill actually to on your driver's license. If you have a driver's license, you could get a mark on it, kind of like a organ donor. So you wouldn't even have to have a new license. Like the idea for cost is keep it as minimal as possible. We don't want that to be an issue. And then I kind of forgot what was the second part of your question?
My second, is there going to be minimum age for the license?
There is not.
Okay, thank you. Next is Marty Edelman. Can we unmute Marty?
Marty, you can unmute. Go ahead.
Thank you
Go ahead,
for
Mark.
inviting the public to listen to what's going on and to voice their opinion. In reference to bikes, what experience have we learned from other major cities regarding licensing of bikes?
I don't know if Devon if he has any knowledge on that. Craig, I know we've reached out and we're going to talk a little bit about that too. And you may have, I don't know if you got some people.
At 7 o'clock, when Brian has to leave the meeting, we're going to have someone here from Honolulu speaking about their experience as a city that has mandatory bike registration. And we're going to have someone from New Orleans which had mandatory bike registration, and it has since transitioned to a voluntary program. And they could speak to their experiences and how those programs worked.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Let's see. Devon Gould, I believe, is the next member of the public. Can we unmute Devon?
Hi. I have to say, so I'm a former public member of this committee, and I just think, in the past month and a half, we have in Community District 8, 3 people run over and killed by reckless drivers, and I really don't know why this community board is spending time on a proposal which is really about a new mandate to control and to criminalize cyclists, which I really think there's zero evidence empirically will make people safer, and instead will just lead to more harassment of working cyclists. And I think this is just not a very good idea, and it's not a good use of the community board's time. I would just read to you what our new council member, Julie Menon, said during her campaign about bike safety. The person that this community elected, who knows our community. She said that the next step in the fight for street safety includes dramatically expanding the city's protected bike network. Studies show that protected bike lanes make streets safer, not just for the city's booming number of cyclists, but for drivers and pedestrians as well. And so I think that is, if we care about safety, we should listen to the person who this community elected and not to somebody who doesn't live in this community.
Thank you. I will say, Devon, that the number of the members of the committee have wanted to discuss this subject, and I think Craig and I felt that this was something that we ought to do, since we try to run a democratic operation here, as opposed to other operations that have been talked about recently. Not here, but elsewhere.
Chuck,
okay.
I wonder if we should just give members a chance to ask Brian any questions, because he only has 14 minutes at this point.
Yeah, maybe that. I think you're right. We have a couple of public members, but why don't we go to the board? I agree. I think the first hand that I see was Paul quickly. Paul?
Thank you, Jack. Brian, thank you very much for coming. I can see that it sounds like a very appealing thing when you talk about doing licensing, and it's about providing order. And helmets, what's wrong with helmets? Helmets are a good thing, because it's, if you have a head injury, it'll help you, clearly. But the trouble is, there are massively bad unintended consequences if we do something like this. The biggest thing we should be concerned with, just like Devon just said, is the safety of everybody on our streets. Time and time again, we have put in protected bike lanes, and the number of fatalities and injuries for both pedestrians and cyclists and motorists has gone down. Every time we do it, that happens. That's why we have sidewalks for people walking or in wheelchairs, and cars somewhere else. The biggest way of doing that is to provide infrastructure. And when you start doing that, you get more numbers of people coming. And oddly enough, you get this virtuous circle where the more people come, the more infrastructure you get. And it's the opposite of induced demand. People come for it. And the trouble with some approach like this is that it makes people not want to ride a bike. It reduces demand. And it makes, therefore, everyone unsafe. If you look at continental Europe, nowhere are there helmet laws like this, or anywhere. Nowhere do they have licensing like this. It's a misguided approach. And if you look back in this country, you could look at this. I sent this to Craig. There's some very bad unintended consequences. The first one is the issue of equity. It sounds like a nice gooey word. What it means is, as recently as a few months ago on the TV news here, there was some cops in a New Jersey town, it was Perth Amboy, harassing and terrorizing some young men of color on their bikes who are doing nothing wrong, using very antiquated laws like this. We're giving people more chances to do whatever inequities we have going on already in this society. The second unintended consequence is cost. Time and time again, city after city has found in this country that the cost is pretty large, and the return in terms of improved safety or anything else is zero from this. The list is like this. Honolulu is the only city of any consequence where something like this is still used. North American cities where they tried and stopped: Ottawa, Long Beach, Seattle, San Jose, San Diego.
Paul,
yeah.
Paul, can I ask you to cut it short a little bit?
Okay.
Because I'm trying to get more.
I understand. I just feel very strong. I'm sorry. I feel very strongly about this. My question, therefore, I guess for Brian is, please rethink this. I think this is a really bad idea.
Thanks, Brian. I don't know if you want to respond.
Yeah, I mean, my only response is I'm here to kind of provide technical expertise on the bill. I'm not here to sell you on it. I don't care if you like it or not. My boss likes it, and so I drafted a bill my boss likes, and I'm here to kind of answer technical questions. So,
okay,
that's all I have.
Thank you. Okay, Michelle Birnbaum.
And I'll just request that anyone who's speaking in over the next 10 minutes, if you could just try to keep it to any questions we have. So this way, for Brian, we'll make sure everyone gets a chance to speak and provide their viewpoints after Brian and the others get to present their technical presentation.
Yes. Okay, Brian, thank you very, very much for being here. I am fully support in support of the senator's effort. I requested that a representative of his be here. He basically has 4 bills, one that establishes bicycle and electric scooter operator safety manual and licensing. Another requires instruction in bicycle and scooter safety as part of the driver's pre-licensing course. The other requires license plates for bicycles, electric assist and electric scooters, and then a mandatory scooter safety education for people obtaining a license to operate the vehicle. This is long overdue. Cyclists, like everybody else, need to be accountable, responsible, and identifiable, and also liable. I'm voicing.
Michelle, hold a
Did you
second.
call on me to voice my?
I know, but we have plenty. We'll have time to talk among ourselves. Do you have a question before Brian leaves? We want, if people have questions, we want to let board members.
Yeah, yes, I do. I do. But I wanted him to know that he has supporters here as well. I understand where this has been tried and where it has failed was always primarily due to the finances and not necessarily due to the merits. The finances being that in an effort to make it possible for most people to obtain a license and to ride, the costs and the fees have been very, very, very low. And because of that, the programs became unviable because the townships, some of them were small, not all big cities like Honolulu, they couldn't afford to maintain it. So my question is, because I want to see this happen, has the senator gained any kind of support where there would be supplemental monies from some government entity that would supplement this? Because it's noble to keep the cost down. I'm in favor of that. But has he done any inquiry or research as to how he can do that?
No, this would be a cost picked up by the state and you know, passed on to the people.
Okay, so but you're saying the cost will be picked up. You're not saying supplemented. You mean it'll be billed through the state, passed on to the people in terms of making it whole? Or you know what I'm trying to say? In other words,
I do. Yeah, no, this, you know, the idea of this bill was that the cost of this program would be paid for by, you know, you'd have to buy the license plate. And so the cost of the license plate, I don't know how much it costs to make, $1 or $2, but you know, that's going to have to be purchased by the, you know,
okay. So the financial plan was to have some kind of distribution.
Can we go on next? So let's go and remember, as I've been saying, please try to keep it to questions here. Next is Sharon Pope Marshall. Sharon, can we?
Thank you very much, Chuck, and also thank you, Craig, and I really appreciate you attempting to keep this conversation overall balanced. I absolutely believe that biking, walking, and driving are complementary modes of transportation. Yes, I do have a question, and I'd like to preface it if you don't mind.
No, I do. Sharon.
Yes.
Hold it.
However,
I normally don't mind.
I have not. I have.
We're going to have time to do this. We're not going to have any time. It is now about 6:54. We have 6 minutes, and we have others who want to speak. So please just ask a question so we can get on to other speakers. We'll have time to talk and make your points later.
So other people besides me, Chuck, have been able to preface their remarks. However, out of respect for what you're saying, Chuck, I will wait, and I will wait to speak at a different portion of the committee meeting. with that said, my hand should remain raised and I should be one of the first. This.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a question or is that? Okay, all right. Let's, Alita Camp, can we unmute Alita?
Thanks, Chuck. Just quickly, how are electric scooters defined? I came in a couple minutes late. I looked at the statute that I could find, but I wasn't sure. Does it apply to those 49cc little mini motorcycles?
It's a great question. So recently the state just began regulating e-scooters and e-bikes. They put into the law a bunch of, what the definitions were. Previously, they were not legal, although I don't think there was much enforcement to that. So it's defined as the legislature recently defined it. I don't have that statute in front of me. So I'm not sure how, if the what you're talking about, how many cc's did you say?
49. So I think 50 is the cutoff for registration and DMV stuff. And there are a lot of these really tiny 49. I saw a lot, not a license plate, but ID on it that said 49cc. And I've spoken to police and I think 50 is the cutoff. So they have no license plate, no registration, no identification, nothing. And they ride in the bike lanes and they ride on the sidewalks. That's what I'm wondering.
I'd have to look into it. I know from at least a point of view from the Senate, my boss is he would like to catch those. I'd have to verify that they are getting caught, but by our bill. But certainly, if our bill doesn't catch it, it's a pretty good chance I will amend it based on your comments because he wants to catch anything that's not a motor vehicle. So okay. I'm sorry I don't have an answer, but I appreciate you bringing it to my attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck.
Billy Freeland.
Hi, Brian. Thank you for joining. Hi, Brian. Thank you for joining us. I just pulled up the bill. Your stated justification is as e-bikes and bicycles grow in popularity, it's time for New York to once again lead the country by requiring these types of vehicles to have license plate issued by DMV. You refer to motor vehicles and how New York was first in the nation to require license plates for automobiles. Yet the legislation is limited to cities with a population of 1 million or more, clearly singling out New York City. And bikes are popular upstate, being from there. So my question is, why does the legislation limit it and single out New York City?
Simple answer to that is that's what my my boss explicitly wanted. I don't really have another another reason for it. He's from Brooklyn and wanted this to only be applicable to New York City. That's. I wish I had a better answer for you, but that's quite honestly it.
I understand. Can you find out for us why and get back to us? Is that possible?
I will try. Yes.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Billy. I think we have Elaine Walsh, I believe. Next.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Elaine.
Question is, you've talked about registering the bikes. What about the license for the bike rider? Is this part of what the senator would like to see done, as well as insurance? Let me just say today, a bike and not a messenger whipped around the corner and I almost got hit and thrown on the floor on the street. We have no accountability. There's no way to trace. And let me just say one other thing. This data you have about fatalities or accidents is only according to what goes on in the emergency room. How many of us, including myself, have gone to a doctor when hit and not to an emergency room? So the data is flawed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Can you get back?
I think we're just about out of time.
I could do one more question.
One more question. Okay, Peter Borak.
Great. Thank you so much. Quick question for Brian. Brian, thanks for joining us for an evening. Obviously, you're not, paid to do this at night, so thank you. Quick question. Do you two very quick questions. One is, in drafting this legislation, did you look at other cities' legislation, such as Honolulu, and take any lessons from that, or is this purely based solely on the motor vehicle law? That's question number one.
Okay. Yeah. So I certainly did what I would consider a significant amount of research for this. I did find, in fact, you're right, that Honolulu was the only place that had it. I will not be watching that gentleman speak, although I will be watching what he says after, because I am very interested. Because you're right, that was the only place I found that had it. And at the end of the day, what my senator said, he said, listen, I want this to be applicable. His saying is one road, one rule. I want this to be, I want it to take right out of motor vehicle. We want to put bikes in it. So, that's what we did. I did search everywhere, high and low, and I do know Honolulu was the only place. We decided not to, look at that because we wanted to, one road, one rule is what we wanted. So, so that answers hopefully that your question there.
It does. Thank you. And the second question is, obviously, you work for an elected official, and so your job is to effectively do what the elected official says. Similarly, your job is to report back to the elected official what community groups and boards are saying. So my question for you is, obviously, on this board, this is a very heated topic, and you can just hear by prefaces that some people are clearly in favor of this and some people are clearly against this. Do you plan, when you report back or have your next meeting with your boss, to report back that there was mixed reviews on this, and some people were for this, and certainly some people are and were against this?
Yeah, that's exactly what I will say. I don't think. That's exactly what I will say. I think, and it seems to be accurate. I don't know. I'm sure there is more support on one side and one more opposed, but I'm not even necessarily here I'm certainly not as an advocate, just to kind of help you guys understand the bill. So, but that's literally all I will say is I went to it, support, some opposed, which, we've kind of seen across the city. But it's been pretty minimal, I would say.
Thank you, Brian. We appreciate you coming. I know you
I have to put my my 2-year-old to bed, so I'm sorry I could not spend more time. Thank you guys. Good luck, and feel free to email me if you need anything.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Appreciate you coming. Craig, you wanted it, and we have somebody from Honolulu here.
Yeah, so I was going to ask Will if you could please unmute Chris Sayers. He is on the call. He is from Honolulu, and we have Dan Jatras from New Orleans. And I will let Chris speak first. I know there's been a lot of discussion about Honolulu, and Chris, feel free to just provide an overview of Honolulu's program. And Chris also only has about a half hour that he could spend. So when this conversation is done, I'm not sure how long Dan has, but again, we'll do the same thing. If anyone has questions first, we'll take some questions from everyone for Chris and Dan, and then once that's done, we can then have our own debates and discussions, if you don't mind. Thank you very much. Will we be able to unmute them?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us.
Aloha, everybody.
Aloha.
Aloha.
So, yeah, I'll just give you a little background of our program. It's been in place longer than I've been here. I been with the city as the bicycle coordinator in the transportation department for 28 years. I moved from, not too far from you guys, I moved from Connecticut to Honolulu in 1980. And the bike registration was already in effect then. It was from the 70s, I think kind of early 70s. And there used to be an actual license plate. Sometime in the, I think, later 70s, they went to a sticker. And it used to be a yearly thing where people had to get re-registered just like you do in your car. And it used to be minimal. At one point when I started with the city, at some point they went to a biannual registration. Every 2 years you had to pay $8. And what they were finding was people would get the form in the mail, but a lot of people were not returning it, not re-registering their bikes. A lot of people were. It used to be every year was a different color, just like, well, I don't know what you have in New York, but here we have an annual car registration sticker, a safety inspection sticker, and you can put those. Anyway, on the bikes, you would see ones that would be, you'd have a thick layer of, somebody would have, 6 or 8 stickers, and you can see all the colors. But at some point, they went to every 2 years, $8. When that's what it was when I started with the city, and in an effort to get people to re-register, I sent out a thing that went with the re-registration letter, and it was the benefits of this. So recovering your stolen bicycle. Our fund goes, the monies that are collected go into a special fund that can only be spent on bicycle programs and projects. And it's been pretty consistent over the years. The revenue is approximately 400,000 a year. I don't know if that sounds like a lot, but it doesn't build you much, bike lanes that we're talking close to $1 million a mile for another bike path anyway. So that's kind of the background. There was about, I think it was right around year 2000, you got to think about the bureaucracy of this, right? I mean, all the paperwork, so every year. So the actual program does not go through our department. It goes to another department, basically DMV. And they wanted to cut down on this paperwork. So they wanted to do a one-time fee, and they wanted to make it revenue neutral. So they came up with $15 one-time fee. And it actually has been pretty much revenue neutral in that way. Generally, when people buy a bike in a bike shop, they have these registration forms. So it's done at the point of purchase. And there's other ways if you buy a bike, a used bike on wherever, you're supposed to go to the satellite city hall and register. We actually do not have, it's not even online yet, it's the DMV, for whatever reason, everything else is online except that, pretty much. So it's kind of a pain, I think, for them. And so there's been some success in the sense that we get some revenue, and but I have heard some of the complaints, I think, are valid in that it can target bicyclists that may or may not have the bike registration. This is a sticker that goes on the bike frame, so it's not like a license plate on your car where the police can see pretty easily if it's valid, if you have a license plate or not. And so we actually had a lot of complaints. It's funny, I just had a meeting with our police department today, another Zoom meeting, and they're talking about safety. A few years ago, they were targeting bicyclists that didn't have bike registration. They were pulling people over, and they were doing it with safety funds. They had there's federal NHTSA safety funds, and they were using these funds. And other people have said here about the safety aspect. There's not really a safety aspect to the bike registration. And so we were in opposition to what our police department was doing, targeting bicyclists without a bicycle license. And so that's kind of the downside. And you've already pointed that out. It can be an equity issue, or just, people for one reason or another just don't have their bike registered. And it is the bicycle, not the rider. We've had people complain and say, well, I think the bicyclist should be licensed, but that's just impossible, really. So with that, I hope that's some background. I'll be welcome to take any questions you have.
Great, thank you so much. Dan, do you wish to provide a little overview of how New Orleans program was operated to the best of your knowledge, and how it transitioned from a mandatory to a voluntary program?
Sorry, who is that I'm supposed to unmute for there?
Oh, sorry, this is Dan Jatras.
Dan, go ahead and unmute. Sorry about that.
No worries. Good evening, everyone. As Craig said, my name is Dan Jatras. I'm with the Office of Transportation in the city of New Orleans. New Orleans previously had a mandatory bicycle registration program that was run through our police department. That could be completed either at the time of sale for a bicycle at a retailer, or someone could come to the police department to register a bike that they purchased privately or brought into the city from somewhere outside, whether they were moving here or just purchased it elsewhere. And the registration had a $3 cost. About 4 or 5 years ago, we transitioned that registration program to a voluntary registration from a mandatory. And it was primarily a couple reasons that that was done. The mandatory system was not particularly user-friendly. It was hard to update your information. It required you to physically come to the police department anytime, if your address changed or other contact information changed, which people often did not do. So registration data was usually out of date after several years. It was difficult to transfer a bike registration if you sold your bike or you purchased your bike outside of a retailer. You had to handle all the registration issues yourself, which again required going to police headquarters. The local registration database wasn't linked to any broader national database, so it reduced the impact or the usefulness of that registration information for items like being able to search and try to link recovered stolen bikes back to their original owners. And it really didn't have any role in traffic enforcement. Similar to Honolulu, we were using stickers that were placed on the frame of the bike. They weren't particularly visible without having actually stopping and the person riding the bike and looking very closely. It wasn't something that officers could see. It wasn't something that photo enforcement could see. So it didn't really have a role in traffic enforcement. But similarly, there was the concern that it provided an opportunity for probable cause for traffic stops that may otherwise, just equate to harassment of people that didn't violate any other traffic law. So we moved it over to our safety and permits department, which made it more accessible for people to utilize when it became voluntary. The other big issue was the cost of the registration didn't come anywhere close to covering the cost of running the program. And if to enforce registration requirements to the point where even though it was mandatory, a lot of people chose not to do it because of the inconveniences and the cost of enforcement to get compliance higher would just add to the cost of running the program. And again, those costs were not being covered by the $3 one-time fee. It wasn't annual or renewal or anything. So when we transferred it or switched it over to the voluntary system, managed through our safety and permits department to make it more accessible to the public. And when they register that bike, it's automatically registered with Bike Index, which is one of the national bike registry databases. That allows people to be able to log in after the fact on their own, update their information at any time. Or if they sell their bike, that registration can carry over to the new owner and that information can again be updated online. And really, we felt like that provided a better service to our residents and that the primary use of the registration is in the event that your bike is stolen and later recovered. The registration is a great tool for law enforcement to try to restore that bike to its original owner. So that's kind of the overview, and similarly, happy to answer any other questions that I can.
Great, thank you very much, Dan. So I guess much like we did previously, let's open up the discussion to questions first from the public. And again, I'm pleading with everyone out of respect for both Chris and Dan and their time, because they're doing this on their own time, to please just keep this to questions and save any comments and opinions you have until we enter a more general discussion after they leave the call. So the first person I see with her hand raised is Rosalie. And again, we're going to, if there are a lot of speakers from the public, we may have to limit them because I want to make sure board members have an opportunity as well to speak. So Rosalie, can
yes, thank you. But I'll wait until the general communicate, when we have general questions among ourselves.
Great, I appreciate that. Thank you. Leah Hamlin, can we unmute Leah, please?
Yes, thank you. This question is for both of our representatives. You've probably heard our discussion, the discussion from Senator Felder's assistant, that his law was oriented toward safety and requiring cyclists to take tests and register the bikes. It sounds like your programs are more oriented toward finding returning stolen bikes, although the police have sometimes used them for enforcement purposes. Could you talk a little bit about whether yours is the same kind of program as being proposed here?
Yeah, our program, like I said before, there's not really any safety element to ours. It was more registering the bike. There was an element of theft recovery that was, I think, I don't know the original, I wasn't, it was again an existing program when I started, but that no doubt is an element of it. But a few years back, I have these monthly meetings, and our police department representative came and said that they recover approximately 16% of stolen bicycles. I don't know if that's good or bad, but the sticker on the bike probably does help that a little bit. It's kind of a difficult sticker to remove without really scraping it off, and then it really looks like you've altered the bike. So there's some success there. I don't know if that's enough to make up for some of the downsides, but there's not really a safety aspect to it. We do have plenty of safety materials that we distribute to our satellite city halls and other outlets, but it's not directly tied to the bike registration.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Our traffic safety efforts were not directly linked with the bicycle registration, specifically around bicycle transportation safety. Similar to what Chris was just saying, we have various materials that we have produced and distribute through our various channels to our residents, and we have partnerships in the community around workshops and training opportunities for bicycle safety and road safety in general, and have worked with our partners at the state level to include materials in the driver's education classes, and the driver's education manual for the state of Louisiana includes information about bicycle safety, pedestrian safety, the interactions between different roadway users. I think there's always opportunity for more of that to be incorporated into those materials that everyone is exposed to. But licensing of individuals is all handled at the state level. So it's not an area where the city is directly legislating anything.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next speaker from the public is Dylan Geronimo Kennedy.
Hi, so I guess this is kind of related, but just wanted to kind of reiterate the differences between what y'all had experienced and what is currently being proposed. Just looking from the press release, some of the things being proposed are requiring liability insurance, requiring a helmet, establishing a required educational course, and requiring registration and license plates. Is it correct to say that the only part that has been tried in either of these two cities is the registration and license plate, or sometimes sticker, or were there elements in this proposal that were also in your cities?
Yeah, I think you're categorizing that correctly. New Orleans has only ever had of those different programs, a bicycle registration, required licensing specifically to bicycles separate from, or to bicycle riders separate from licensing for motor vehicle drivers. We have not had that, and or any required courses. And as I mentioned in my last answer, that would all ultimately be something that the state of Louisiana would have to legislate and create. The city of New Orleans itself does not have that legislative authority to do that independently from statewide laws.
Yeah, and similar to what Dan just said, we don't have those other elements either, although we do have a statewide helmet law for people, for riders under 16. So we don't have an adult helmet law. And that was actually, that helmet law, the one that we do have, came much later than the bicycle registration. That's been in effect for about 15 or 20 years.
All right, great. We're going to do one.
Thank you.
We do have a statewide helmet law for youth, but not for adults.
All right. All right, we're going to have one more member of the public, and just to try to make sure that everyone has a chance to participate, we're going to go to someone who hasn't spoken before, so that would be Charles Whitman. And then we're going to go to the community board members, and again, I'm going to start with people who haven't had a chance to speak before.
Hi. Just had a very quick question for both of the gentlemen, and thanks for being here. The universe of bicycles that's covered under the legislation, is it the same one we're looking at in New York? Is it all e-bikes and regular manual bikes, or was it a more limited scope?
We have recently, actually in the last year or two, included electric bikes in the definition of a bicycle, which I wasn't crazy about, but that was just an easy way for them to do it. So, so bicycles and electric bikes are registered the same. Actually, I think they're charging $30 for electric bikes. And then it used to be mopeds were on the same registration form, and they, 3 or maybe 4 or 5 years ago, they changed that. So now moped, because mopeds have really turned into scooters. A long time ago, a moped was different than what it is now. It's really a 50cc scooter, and they are registered like a motorcycle. You don't need a motorcycle license, but you need a driver's license. So those are registered different. They have to be updated every year, like a motorcycle.
When we had our mandatory program, electric assisted bicycles hadn't taken off as much yet. And so there was at that time not a definition in either state or city law specific to electric assist bikes. Since that time, they have been defined, and they are treated in both state and city law the same as bicycles. The same rules and regulations, unless otherwise specified, apply to a bicycle as it does to an electric assist bike. So in terms of our registration program, people, again, are voluntarily welcome to register their e-bikes through our system, just like they would a traditional pedal bike.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's go to board members again, starting with people who haven't spoken before. Let's start with Mrs. Brown.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank Mr. Jeffries and Sayers for your presentation and taking the time to answer our questions. And I'll just run them off and you can answer them accordingly. Is there any data showing how many automobile drivers have and use bikes? That's the first question. My second question is with regard to training. Are there any incentive programs for helmets after training is completed? And/or are you giving out any totes that say I've completed the training, bike training? And how many NOLA and Oahu have linked their bike registrations to driver's license? And my last question, is there any reason why you have not had bike registrations not safety and/or revenue driven? Is there any particular reason why you chose not to focus on those two issues? Or thank you.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the first question? I'm not sure I got that.
Data showing how many automobile drivers have and use bikes.
Oh, I see. No, we don't have that. I mean, I guess we would assume that many adult bicyclists also are drivers, but we don't have any real data on that. We don't have any real training. You mentioned training, so that's not an element of our bike registration. So we don't really have anything there. And you talked about incentives for helmets. There are various incentives. We have an advocacy organization here, the Hawaii Bicycling League, and we fund a bike safety education program with them, and they do some helmet distribution to, I guess you'd say, needy people and people in general. And then there's nothing like it's related to your first one, nothing really linked to driver's license. Like I said, I think many, we again don't have the numbers, but many adult bicyclists we would assume are also drivers.
Yeah, my answers are fairly similar to Chris. In terms of the total number of people that have bicycles in New Orleans, I don't know that number. There's some national numbers that quantify how many people in the United States nationally ride a bike each year. What I can say about New Orleans numbers in terms of, and this is a limited data set because it only captures people that use a bike for their actual work commute, not any other transportation need, like errands or grocery shopping or anything like that. But our bicycle commute mode share is about, I think the latest number was around 3.5%. So that's a couple thousand people that are regularly using bicycling for transportation. The trainings that I mentioned are done through some community organizations and nonprofit organizations focused on traffic safety. Some of their courses do provide like a certificate of like you've completed this workshop, and various groups in the community have helmet giveaways. We really try to emphasize that a helmet is there as the last resort. It shouldn't be viewed as the only thing someone's doing to keep themselves as safe as possible on the road. And the bike registrations are not linked in any way to someone's driver's license.
And what about the last question regarding the program? Why is it not revenue driven or safety driven? Is there any particular reason why you opt not to do that?
In our case, it has been brought up by people. We get complaints, from the public about some of the similar complaints that you had here about bicyclists, buzzing a pedestrian on the sidewalk and whatnot. And so some people do suggest, why don't you make people get training before they? It's just, I think our answer is usually the bureaucracy of it, trying to get, and then you have the problem with, the difference with drivers is that you have a certain age limit. On a bicycle, you can have a 10-year-old. How do you make them do this training? We actually have, like I said, the Hawaii Bicycling does some training. They go to all of the fourth grade schools and give them this bike ed program, but to train everybody would just be very difficult. And as far as revenue, that we do get some revenue. It actually is revenue positive. Like I said, we generate approximately 400,000 a year. I think about 50,000 of that or so goes to the administration of the program. I don't know the exact number, but I've seen a number similar to that before.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Valerie Mason.
Thanks. Thanks for being here. How would you describe, I've been to New Orleans, but I can't remember. Do you have a lot of delivery traffic in your streets, either one of your jurisdictions? Do you have a lot of, I don't know if either of you have been to New York City and seen our bike lanes. Do you have protected bike lanes where you are? Just trying to get an idea before I ask you my next question to understand the interaction between bikes and cars and trucks.
Yeah, we do have protected bike lanes in New Orleans. It will vary from neighborhood to neighborhood because a lot of the historic core of New Orleans has very narrow streets. Obviously, large parts of New Orleans existed well before cars. So it really depends on what part of the town you're in as to what kind of dedicated bicycle infrastructure we have on our roadways.
Mhm,
And in term, I think you mean about bicycle deliveries specifically.
mhm.
It's nowhere near to the scale that it is in New York City. I'll just put it that way. We do have bicycle delivery people, but in terms of like the percentage of deliveries that are made by bicycle, I don't think comes close to what my understanding of it is in New York City.
Yeah, the same here. We have protected bike lanes and we're adding more and more, but I was actually just in New York in December and been there quite a few times. And yeah, it's much more extensive network in New York than here. And we don't have that much. I mean, there are some bicycle delivery, but not a lot.
Right, but I mean, in comparison, like in your street, you were saying, Mr. Jatries, that you have narrow streets. You don't really have 3 or 4 lane avenues with protected bus lanes or anything like that. Do you have bike sharing programs?
Yes, we do have bike share. Yeah, we don't have roads that would be comparable to like the Manhattan Avenues of, you know, 4 or 5 lanes that are all one direction. Most of our major streets are divided roadways with a center median that, you know, will range from 10 to 50 feet in width, a landscape center median, and then be, you know, 2 to 3 lanes in each direction of traffic on either side of that median. Those are what our major streets look like.
Yeah, and do you have I mean, what's your interaction with, when you say that you register bikes, not people, do let's say restaurants, would they register all their bikes? Would businesses register their bikes? How would that, do you have corporate registrations in that regard?
Yeah, we do actually. I mean, any bike is actually required to have it. So we have a bike share program. There's about 1,300 bikes and they had to register all of them. So it was a sizable amount. Yeah, so yeah, that would,
and then
I don't think they
taking-
got a fleet deal. I think they had to pay the full amount.
Okay, and then taking the, you know, as technology improves, I mean, would you have like a barcode on the bike? I mean, or in terms of the programs that you have now, what, in order to bring them forward with new technology, et cetera, would you, and, you know, like we have, you know, Easy Pass, is there anything under consideration in your jurisdictions regarding upgrading your program to take advantage of new technologies?
Well, on sorry, Dan. On ours, like I had mentioned, our registration forms are still done in triplicate, which is, you know, kind of amazing. They're they still have card catalogs, and so it's it's not our department. I think we would have done it different in our department, but
Well, how would you have done it differently? Let's ask that.
Well, I think it would be online by now. It would have been digital.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say there's not any further changes that I think is on anyone's radar right now after the move to digital that was made when the program went from mandatory to voluntary.
And last question, I don't mean to hog all the time, sort of related in terms of, do you see the bike riding population increasing every year? Do you see that the licensing has been a chilling effect on the number of people riding bicycles? And then lastly, do you neither one of your cities really has extensive public transportation available, correct? You're either in a car or you're maybe using your bike or a bus, I guess.
Well, yeah, we have a pretty good bus system. We are building a rail line, but yeah, we don't have nothing like you know, the subway system in New York.
Yeah, our bike ridership continues to grow. I don't think anyone has directly compared, like, because even when our mandatory registration system was in place, it wasn't strictly enforced. So I'm not sure there's any evidence that it had a chilling effect. And I'm not aware of any research to show, like, once it switched to voluntary, did it change uptake of the use of bicycling directly. Our socioeconomics, I think, is the bigger driver. One in 5 households in New Orleans doesn't have a car. So those households are using other means of transportation, public transit, biking, or walking. We have our transit system is primarily bus, but we also have streetcars and ferries.
Right.
But our bus system is still smaller than it was before Hurricane Katrina.
Okay, sorry, last question. Just want to know who's in charge of enforcement? Is that a police activity or do you have a special force? And please mute me so I don't ask another question.
For us, it's police department.
Bicycle laws or now that you're muted, you can't clarify. Enforcement of traffic laws, whether it's bicycles or motor vehicles, is all under the New Orleans Police Department.
I did want to make one point what you were just saying about, it hasn't had a negative effect. I'm not so sure about the registration, but the helmet has been noted in other places when you do mandatory programs for adults that can have a negative effect on bike ridership. I know in some places that has been the case where bike ridership has gone down where they implemented a mandatory adult helmet program.
Yeah, there's I think Seattle is the largest city in the country that has a mandatory adult helmet program. So that would be a program to look at, and there's research there about what have been the impacts on safety and ridership associated with that mandatory helmet requirement.
All right, that's very helpful to know. All right, next we have Kaz. Can you unmute Kaz, please?
Yeah, I mean, after listening to everybody's questions and answers, we all know New York City is different, between the 3 cities. Forget registration or licensing or whatever you want to call it. How has the safety concern of your 2 cities been? Have you seen increase in safety or decrease in safety lately? And how is it enforced? I mean, we have problems enforcing safety in the city. Realistically, there is no enforcement in New York. What goes on in New Orleans and Honolulu?
Well, I did mention just today we had a meeting with our police department regarding safety programs. They're going to put in an application for these NHTSA, this federal safety funds. And in the past, they had done things that were not safety related. I mentioned with the bike registration, which was a big negative for bicycling, and really did feel like they were hassling the bicyclists when it came down to it. And so we reiterated again that we want these to be, safety related. If you're targeting the bicyclists, they don't have lights at night. If they're running red lights, that's one thing. But some other things were not safety related at all. And also we make the point that you should be targeting the driver more so than the bicyclist, because the bicyclist is the vulnerable user and the driver is the one that has the potential, for these crashes to be deadly.
Okay, and what about New Orleans?
Yeah, I think like most cities, there's probably less traffic enforcement than there needs to be based on the behaviors we're witnessing on the road. Our number of fatalities were up across all types of road users. We're up last year, as many cities experienced. And I think 40 of the 50 states experienced an increase in traffic fatalities in 2021. So there's some unfortunate trends that we're all trying to address. So we've got traditional officer-based enforcement, but we also do have photo enforcement in New Orleans around speed and red lights, and that does have the data shows that is impactful, at least at the locations that that photo enforcement exists.
So theoretically, we should be encouraging enforcement rather than licensing and registration.
I think enforcement and education. The the end goal is the behavior change of everyone using the public right of way in a safer manner to keep themselves safe and to keep others safe. And you achieve that through a multi-pronged strategy of improving your built environment infrastructure, improving your education and awareness, and then you have the enforcement there for the really egregious behaviors, or for the segment of the population that just refuses to change their behavior until they get their hand slapped with a fine or some other punishment.
Thank you.
All right.
And
Go ahead, Chuck.
I just wanted to clarify one thing. You said you had camera enforcement for red light running and speeding on bicycles, but that relies on the fact that there is a registration, on the bike. There's something on the bike, right?
No, I'm sorry. The enforcement is not specific to bicycles. The photo enforcement. I was just talking about our global enforcement picture. We do have photo enforcement, which is I wouldn't classify as the norm in most cities because of a lot of cases cities' hands are tied because of state laws or whatnot around photo enforcement. But our photo enforcement program is not able to capture bicycles because there is not an identifiable license plate or anything. So we rely on manpower part of side of the enforcement equation for anything that's related to a bicycle rider violating a traffic law.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. If Dan and Chris, if you don't mind, we have two more board members that had questions, and then we can see if then we had two other hands that were still up in the public. I'd leave it up to you. But if it's okay, I'd just like to get to the other two board members if possible, and then you can tell me if you have time for any additional questions.
Yes,
great. Thank you so much. We will truly appreciate it. And this has been extremely insightful. If we could just unmute Sharon. I know she had her hand up first, and then we'll go to Michelle.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. First of all, thank you, Craig, and also thank you, Chuck. This is a difficult conversation to have, and I think that you both are doing a phenomenal job at trying to balance a variety of viewpoints, and really appreciate that, and also appreciate the efforts made to pull in other representatives from around the country who have responsibility for implementing these types of bicycle licensing or cyclist licensing programs. With that said, as I had alluded to previously, was that I do believe that biking, walking, and driving, horseback riding even, are complementary modes of transportation. And I want to raise a couple of points.
Wait, Sharon, do you have any questions for them? Because otherwise we're going to raise the points afterwards.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not realize that you were asking for.
That's fine.
Oh, I do apologize. No, my hand was raised for
okay.
The discussion.
But we'll
I'm
make
sorry
sure
about that.
Not a problem. We'll make sure we come back to you.
Okay.
All right, Michelle, did you have any questions? I'm guessing you do.
Yes, I do. Yeah, so I understand these two programs are serving a different function than the one that we, or at least some of us, had in mind for this city. So my question is to both of you, and thank you for being here. But my question is, since your programs do not specifically address safety concerns, and since I think I heard you say that you would probably like them to address safety concerns, without an identifier on a bike or with a driver, what is your mechanism for enforcement? How would you propose enforcing without a mechanism like that? Because what would you use as an identifier? I'll just say that a bicycle, as a car or anything else, is a moving object. So if you see an infraction, or even if there's an accident, that bicycle can continue to move. And if it moves, it's unidentifiable. So in order to address the safety concerns, which is predominantly what I'm concerned about, how would you propose going about doing that? Or even with your cameras, if you saw an egregious act by a bicycle, how could you possibly address it, since there's nothing identifiable on the bicycle or the driver? What would be your suggestions?
I'm not sure that's really that possible. You know, it's hard enough to get a photo of a license plate on a car, I think. So just like a lot of times you hear the police say, we can only enforce it if we catch them in the act, right? So if they happen to be there, or that somebody complains and it happens quick enough. As far as the decal, the sticker on the bike, I guess that's a little easier to see than every bike has a serial number. So if the bicycle was involved in a crime, for instance, it's still identifiable with a serial number, but it's not linked to anything other than maybe who purchased it originally. But so that can help a little bit there, I suppose, with the bike registration.
But you would have to catch the bike in order to read the serial number.
That's right.
I'm saying on a moving vehicle involved in an accident of some kind. Anyway, thank you for that. And what does Dan have to say, if you don't mind?
Sure. I mean, I think generally, if a bicycle is involved in a violation or involved in a crash, if law enforcement observes that, just like if they observed it with a motor vehicle, they can stop that person and issue the citation. Or if they're involved in a crash, it's most likely that the bicycle and the bicycle rider are not going to just be riding off immediately, you know, because typically a bicycle motor vehicle crash is going to result in an injury to the bicycle rider. So, you know, in terms of if that person contributed to the incident with a violation, you know, they are going to be, and there's a police officer present to observe it, they can still cite that person just as they would cite any other roadway user for a violation. It really doesn't matter if the bicycle itself is registered or not, because the violation is to the individual.
Guess what, Dan, I guess what Michelle's saying, would it make sense to have some kind of a license plate for the bicycle that people could see more readily than just a sticker or something like that? With that, from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think our experience has shown that the juice isn't worth the squeeze, to try to go with an analogy. Like the cost of setting up a bicycle registration system that is mandatory and consistently complied with versus the benefit it's bringing to road safety just isn't there and isn't worth the investment.
Chris, do you have any thoughts or comments on that?
Well, yeah, again, so from the safety aspect, it's not really there. It's not something that was set up for safety. I guess with some of the revenue that we do get from it, we can do safety programs, and we do, but it's not directly a safety program.
Just to follow up, could you see a program like this, licensing or an identifier for bicycles, could you see it punched in to your existing motor vehicle system? You know, with electronics, you laughed at the fact that you're still looking through ledgers and 3x5 cards. But the reality is, of course, that with the nature of computers and technology that we have, that all this is actually possible at not such a big cost, especially since you already have an electronic infrastructure set up for your automobiles. And something like this would be plugged in to your existing structure. What I'm saying is you don't have to go back and reinvent the wheel. So the point is, do you see, because there are situations where bicycles cause accidents. You know, you can have a bicycle weaving in and out, and in order for a car to avoid them, they have the crash. There's all kinds of possibilities for how and why a bicycle, a scooter, any other entity could be involved or the cause of an accident. Taking that as an assumption, taking that as to be true, you certainly would want those people held accountable. So considering the fact that you have an existing system, could you see where if you had that need, and your cities are far less problematic on this end than ours is, and that's why we talk about in cities 1 million and under, 1 million and over, because we recognize that a little town of 10,000 people doesn't need an extensive, bike enforcement program. But cities of 1 million or more certainly do. And it's not meant to ticket 12-year-olds. It would start at 16 or 18, and children driving are not the concern and not the issue. So in your cities, can you see this being valuable, plugged into your system and as a reasonable cost, and as a way for a victim to get some accountability and some liability, accountability and responsibility from the person who has hit them or caused an accident, etc. Could you see that as being a workable situation in either of your cities?
I think the level of uptake and compliance in the system is really the biggest question. And I think we would be faced with challenges because I mentioned before the socioeconomics of our city. 1 in 5 households doesn't have a car, and that tends to line up with the portion of the population that's lower income in New Orleans. So creating additional barriers to their transportation options, I think, is detrimental to the larger goals of having accessible transportation options for our citizens, and trying to plug it in to the existing registration and licensing that's run by the state creates barriers, because most of the motor vehicle offices in New Orleans are located in more car-oriented parts of the city that are not necessarily aligned with the parts of the city where we have more people that rely on bicycles for transportation. So that access becomes a huge barrier then to, if we put that system in place, but people aren't able to, even if they choose to, aren't able to easily get into the system, then we're not accomplishing the end goal, or accomplishing the goal that you stated of having it applied the same way.
Would you recognize that such a satellite office could be put anywhere, including a storefront or any other location in any area around the city? And assuming that can be true, then in that case, could you see this being working for you? Because no matter who the person is that's riding the bike, if that person is non-compliant to the extent that an accident is caused or something like that, you certainly want that person, no matter who he or she is, to be held accountable for the victim. So if you could solve that problem and have little satellite offices, et cetera, would that make sense for you? I just read an article today where surgical centers are going to be placed in department stores that have gone out of business in malls. So if we could do a surgical outpatient surgical center in a remote location, we could probably do it with a little 2x4 office, street level office. So if that were the case, could you see this being a workable situation?
That kind of approach, I think, has the potential to lower that access barrier, but I'm still not sure that was just one example of a potential barrier to getting people in. I think there are other concerns about, what is the cost of registration, the general burden of the process on someone that, particularly someone from a low-income household, and the hours of access to that office. So there's lots of questions that need to be asked and answered that are probably different from community to community as to how do you connect the ideal and the existence of a program and people's ability to access it and motivation to access it for the benefit that they see for themselves, as well as the benefit to society as a whole. So I'm not sure I have a direct answer to that.
Okay, how about you, Chris?
Well, as far as accountability, I mean, it's just your scenario. I don't know if you're getting it, possibly a bicyclist hitting a pedestrian and then riding off. The actual bike license, I'm not sure that would help, because again, the sticker, it's pretty small. Nobody can see that number unless you're up pretty close. So I don't think that would be a big help, generally speaking. And they're a hit and run, drive, and people do that in their car even. So I don't see that as a huge improvement or a reason for this kind of program.
I think we should, I don't know, we very much appreciate Chris and Dan taking time to do this. I know we want to have a general discussion among board members about this. So maybe we should say we'll go, why don't we thank them and let them go, and we should, I think we've gotten a sense of the programs, and we really appreciate all the time that you spent with us.
I was going to say the same thing.
And I think we should move on to sort of discuss and let you folks go back to whatever else you would like to do at this point. And again, our great thanks for your thoughts and your discussion of the program.
And remember, it's 3:00 in Hawaii, so Crystal's at work.
That's right. I'm at work, and I hate to tell you, but it's 80 degrees and sunny here.
Don't say that, Chris. and Dan, though, he's closer to our time schedule here, so it's. But we appreciate you both taking the time, and I think it's given us a good sense of what the programs are, and I think we'll have a general discussion among I think the board at this point, because I know we have an item that there are a number of people I think who are here for coming afterwards, so we don't want to we've been at this for about an hour and a half, and we don't want to spend that much more time, but we promised the board a fuller discussion, so that's what I think we should do.
Well, it was a good discussion. Good luck.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Aloha.
Aloha, and thank you, Chris and Dan.
Good evening.
So why don't we go ahead now? Now, we did promise that we'd have discussions among the board, and Sharon, we did promise Sharon, and why don't we'll just call on, although, is there anybody that we haven't, maybe we should get any board members that haven't spoken. Is there any board member? I think Rita Popper may be the only board member that hasn't spoken, and then we'll go to Sharon and everybody else has spoken, I think, at that point. Go ahead, Rita. Rita.
Every year I make the same offer and nobody has taken me up on it. So I'm not going to be pushed away. I'm going to make the same offer again. I get the feeling every time we talk about bikes that the bikers want us to understand the bikers, and the pedestrians want us to understand the pedestrians and how the two interact. I have offered to stand on a corner with a biker and just see how many bikers are not wearing helmets, how many bikes don't have lights, and how many bikers are not wearing, and how many bikers are riding not in the bike lane, even when there is a bike lane. That's it. So that you would understand, you meaning bikers would understand what pedestrians are going through, and you could also understand that not every biker who comes to our meetings is the perfect biker. They have lights, they have helmets, they have everything. But the people who don't come to these meetings are the people who are dangerous. Not all, obviously, not all, but there are bikers who are causing pedestrians to be unsafe. So I offer once again that I will stand on any street corner for an hour with a biker, and we will see let's see what's going on. We're not seeing it in this, sitting here. Every biker who's on our board, not on the board, adheres to every single law. But we're not talking about you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let's go to Sharon. Sharon, we're going to take, and then we'll go down the list. Go ahead, Sharon. Can we unmute Sharon?
Sharon, whenever you're ready.
Okay, go ahead.
You're good.
Thank you. All right, let's get right to it. Let's see, where should I begin? I would like to begin with the issue of transportation equity. I bristle at the thought of criminalizing biking in general, criminalizing cyclists. And I also bristle at the idea that there is a possibility, in particular, that people of color can be targeted. And that is not too far afield at all. So, for example, in Florida, according to Bloomberg City Lab, I read an article that 86% of the citations were given to people of color, although they are only 31% of the population. I think that all of our efforts and funding should go to support protected bike lanes, separated, protected, whatever you want to call it, bike lanes, protected, separated bike lanes. That's what we should be discouraging. That's what we should be encouraging, not discouraging biking. Secondly, I want to emphasize and answer a question of my own. What is the problem here? If the problem is that there is a feeling that perhaps cyclists may not, for example, know the rules of the road, there are multiple organizations, including Bike New York, that community groups and organizations can partner with in order to spread the word regarding rules and regulations for cyclists, specifically focusing on the rules of the road. And by the way, we have licensing of drivers, and we still have a multitude of accidents. No one can say, oh, a driver is licensed and has taken the exam, and so this person is well versed in the rules of the road. How many of us have seen drivers violate the rules of the road? And I tell you, I also bristle at this idea of pitting cyclists and pedestrians and drivers against one another. That's just plain wrong. However, sharing is not. I think the idea here is that we should share our streetscape, which is phenomenally important to this city overall. That means that pedestrians and automobile drivers, as well as bike riders, everybody needs to share the rules of the road. And we're moving forward with that. This is automobiles do not own the road. I mean, we've had accidents in which pedestrians have been involved in. No one owns the road. We all do. And so that means that we all have to share it. And this side, you know, it really is quite interesting that we've heard from a variety of people. And in some instances, you know, we learned that, you know what, for one reason or another, it did not work. But you know what, the oldest, it appears through some research that I did, the oldest bike licensing program was in Toronto from 1935 to 1957. Toronto had a bike licensing program that they eventually abandoned. And I'm thinking actually to myself, why are we putting all of this emphasis and money into requiring licensing of bikes and licensing of cyclists, which could be used in a very unmeaningful and underhanded way to criminalize cyclists, criminalize biking, and in particular could be used as a weapon to criminalize people of color who are biking. At the end of the day, we should support Julie Menon's words, which are protected bike lanes. This is what we need, not to implement another bureaucracy. I mean, is there anybody among us that wants another bureaucracy created? Instead, let's support Edonis Rodriguez here in the city, who heads up the New York City Department of Transportation. I don't know, I don't remember the name of the Manhattan representative, but we need to be pushing them in support of Julie Menon's efforts to create additional bike lanes in this city.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see. I want to take Rebecca Dangar, who hasn't spoken, and then Lori Boris, who hasn't spoken. Everyone else on the list has spoken before, a couple times. So go ahead, Rebecca.
Hi, I just have a quick comment or idea. I know a lot of the, at least worries I have felt as a pedestrian walking is obviously, I'm always wary of whether or not, a bike might come and ignore the stop light, right? I don't know really if any of the ideas we heard tonight or really would do anything to improve that situation. Maybe it should be it would be better to focus, as kind of what Sharon was talking about at one point, on educating, reminding people that they should stop, or to have a sign somewhere if there's a particularly dangerous place where we see that happen a lot. Remember, bikes have to stop at the red light. I just, after, hearing these two different kind of versions, which again, I know is different than what some people are envisioning, I just don't really see how that would help, at least the concerns that I felt and heard consistently during these meetings.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. Lori Boros hasn't spoken before.
Thank you, Chuck. Just a couple of things. Cars have been the dominant force on the roads for about 100 years. And bicycles have just come around on New York City streets the last, I don't know, what would you say? I would say 10 years. If you want to be generous, you could say, 15 years, even 20 years. But the difference is that, automobiles have been seen as the dominant transportation for a century, so, and it takes some getting used to by the other people who use the streets, the pedestrians and the bicyclists. And it takes some getting used to for them to learn how to share. So I agree with almost everything that Sharon said. We don't want to, and this leads into my other point, which is that I am a parent who, when my kids were little, it was always more, and even as a teacher, it's much more effective to do the positive than it is to criticize the negative. And we will get much further in safety for everyone, for pedestrians and for cyclists, if we build the bike lanes, make it possible for people to follow the rules instead of punishing them when they don't. I mean, I just think that being punitive about this is not going to help anything, in addition to creating another huge bureaucracy. So that's all I want to say. That's just, I think, go for the positive and just understand that, I mean, like I've made it a point myself now, when I cross the street, I always look both ways in the bike lane before I even get to the automobile street, and change is hard and people are not used to, doing that. And we all have to learn new things, but, that's life. Like, that's how it goes on. So, okay, that's it. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see Sarah Chu hasn't spoken before. Why don't we unmute Sarah?
Thanks, Chuck. I'm just really grateful that we have the opportunity to hear from experts from around the country. This is really, it's amazing that we had this privilege tonight. And I wanted to echo my Sharon's concern and about how, and this was also what the cycling experts told us tonight, is that when we create these new programs, we also create the opportunity for them to be weaponized and to criminalize people who, it offers another stop and frisk opportunity, essentially, is how I can see it play out. And so I cannot support a program that would have that possibility. I also wanted to point out that the safety experts said that that based on their data, that these programs didn't contribute to an increased measure of safety. And there's just so many times when, what we perceive in as being kind of the logical or eventual end to a particular proposal ends up getting defied by what the data actually show. And so that was very compelling to me. And it's not to say that the problem doesn't exist, because I think that the problem exists. And the question is, what is the right solution? And so I wouldn't support a registration program, not because I don't believe that pedestrians have been have had really dangerous encounters, or that we don't need more oversight of cycling. It's just that I don't think that this particular solution is the one that would bring us to a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, we have some people who've spoken before, and I'm going to call on them again, but I'm just going to put everybody on notice. It's 8:15. We're going to go to 8:30 on this issue, and that's it, unless someone. So if someone wants to propose something, I think now's the time to do it. And hopefully you can keep remarks, limited, because I think we have to get on to the next issue, unfortunately. So I'll go to Alita Camp now. I'm going down the list. Let's unmute Alita.
Thank you, Chuck. I just would like to, I have a few things to say. First, pedestrians are the largest group of people in New York. Everyone is a pedestrian at one point or another, and yet our concerns are unheeded in favor of people or transportation mechanisms that are dangerous to pedestrians. We all know that bikes are on the sidewalks. We all know that bikes go the wrong way in the bike lanes, that scooters, that motorcycles use the bike lanes as well. It shouldn't be that you have to look two ways in a bike lane, because traffic and bikes and cars and trucks are supposed to be going in the same direction. Bikes are supposed to comply with traffic laws, but they don't. And we need some mechanism to ensure accountability. In terms of decreasing bike usage, City Bike has a particularly onerous agreement that everyone has to sign to be able to use city bikes. Registration is required. They have credit card information. Does it deter bikes? I don't know. I don't think it does, based on how many people use it. Paris and Tokyo have had, or I believe Tokyo not only requires registration, it requires insurance for bike riders as well. Paris, I think, is looking at some kind of program, if they haven't already, because they are seeing a chaotic environment and a dangerous environment of bikes where people are fearful all the time. I don't know what they have. I know they're not comparable, but neither is Honolulu and New Orleans, for all of the reasons those gentlemen cited, such as density, public transportation, usage of bikes. We have a lot of recreational bike users in New York, and it's a very different population. I also want to say that even if bikes don't cause as many accidents as cars, they still cause accidents, and there needs to be some way of determining whether bikes are responsible and to hold them accountable, because people who are hurt by bikes, what if they don't have health insurance? What if their health insurance doesn't cover it? You ride a bike, you can cause an injury, you can cause an accident. I'm not sure why it doesn't matter that bike riders don't comply with the law. I think that's the first thing that is maybe a threshold issue, is the obligation of bike riders to comply with laws, and they don't. I've seen scooters weave between people trying to cross the street, going against the light in order to get through, and it's dangerous. It's every single day. It's dangerous. I support some kind of registration system, not to be used wrongly, because nobody wants that, but to say no is throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And there has to be a way so that people of color are not targeted, and it's used to ensure some kind of enforcement or some kind of compliance. If people didn't have driver's licenses and people's cars weren't registered, the roads would be even worse than they are now. And we know that. So some kind of mechanism would be useful. And I think that's all I have to say. Car riders are not deterred by having to register their cars and get a driver's license. People have to register for all kinds of activities. And so registration, especially looking at city bikes, should not have the impact of deterring people. I don't think people want to deter bike riders. We just want them to follow the law for the safety of pedestrians. And that includes people who are disabled, people with little kids, and people with strollers and walkers. So I'll just say that. And thank you very much for the opportunity. And thank you for putting this together. But I think, oh, and also Belgium seems to have a registration system. And in reading something about Paris, one of the things they cited was that compliance with regulations is higher in Belgium because of the registration requirement. And as for the system, I think it was New Orleans not being not enhancing safety compliance was because they said they couldn't read the stickers on the bikes, I believe, because it wasn't for that purpose. So I think all of the brains that we have in New York could come up with something that doesn't target people wrongfully, is not used to weaponize or criminalize, but is used to ensure compliance and safety of pedestrians. Thank you. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lita. Michelle? Let's unmute Michelle.
Well, firstly, I'll say ditto to Alita. She expressed it beautifully, and that's really the crux of it all. Thanks, Chuck and Craig, for having this tonight. But I think we have to be mindful that what we were listening to tonight were really on two different ends of the spectrum. We heard Senator Felder's legislation. I would have loved for the committee to see this legislation prior to the meeting. I have it. I could forward it to the office, but I'm sure the office can find it, and maybe at some point post it so that others can have an opportunity to read it.
It's in the chat.
Well, you know, I have it, but I find it hard to do things in the chat because you have to sort of cut and paste the site. You can't get on it while we're talking. So at any rate, I'll leave that technical stuff to you guys, but it would just be nice if everybody could read it. In terms of registration, it's not a dirty word. You have to register to fish. You have to register to hunt. You have to register to speak at our city planning sessions. Does that cut off the public? Does that target people unfairly? Because why should you have to register to speak? Why can't you just go down there and just show up? You know, we live in a society that has to be regulated because there are so many of us. We heard a lot of good information tonight. Not much of it was mutually exclusive. Everything that is happening in New Orleans and in Honolulu could be part of our program. That just because they have not dealt with the enforcement issue doesn't mean that that it was intentionally exclusive from their program. They don't have the same pressing issue in their population and in the size of the population and in the use of cycling. And we're in a city where we do have this issue. I mean, you can always think of reasons not to do something, but I think we've got plenty of reasons to do something. With that statement, I want to say that I do not want to see a resolution tonight. I think too often this board jumps into resolutions without enough discussion and enough information. This is way too premature to have a discussion, especially since most of you have not even read the legislation. And I would wait for that. It was billed on the agenda as a discussion, and it should remain a discussion. But the discussion can always be continued. But don't just toss it out. Don't be scared of regulation. We live with it every minute of every day in 1,000 different circumstances. This city is different. It was lovely to hear from those gentlemen, but but their experiences just do not parallel ours.
Michelle, you said, please, can you sum up because we're going to run out of time.
Yes, absolutely. I was just about to. So that's the takeaway. I'd like you all to go to see the resolution. I mean, the proposed legislation. I'd like you to be that registration and licensing is not a bad thing. It depends how it's written, that everything put out there tonight, that it is not mutually exclusive, and that we do not move forward with anything in particular because I want the discussion to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I will just point out that any committee member is obviously free to offer anything they want to, but maybe they'll adhere to your admonition, but it's up to the committee. Billy Freeland, can we unmute Billy?
Thanks. I will first proudly say I have read the resolution, and this is my marked up copy, not the resolution, rather the legislation. So I guess I'll try to keep this brief. I don't know how successful I'll be, but I found tonight's meeting really informative, and I want to thank Chuck and Craig for pulling it together, and particularly, hearing from Chris Sayers and Dan Jeffries from New Orleans. I thought was really helpful, and a few takeaways. One from Honolulu, that there was not really a safety aspect to the program, is what I believe Chris said. And Chris added, look, he mentioned the example of helmet requirements, because there's not a ton of research necessarily on the effects of these other types of licensing requirements, but seemed to indicate that there's a real risk that you'd reduce ridership by imposing further requirements. And then we also learned a lot from Dan from New Orleans, from the Office of Transportation there, who said that the cost of the registration scheme did not cover the cost of paying for registration, rather, did not cover the cost of actually maintaining the registration scheme, that they had to switch it from a mandatory to a voluntary program because it wasn't user friendly. The data was often out of date. It was difficult to transfer your sold bike or bike you got from a retailer when you sell. It was difficult to transfer your registration. And more. I mean, he even mentioned, I think, that government, the risk of government using registration as a pretext for stops with racially disparate impacts, as I believe Sarah and Sharon and others have mentioned tonight. So I found that all very illuminating and all weighing against implementing a burdensome new bureaucracy from which I've not heard a single upside tonight. I mean, what we heard is that the lived experience is people don't pay the registration fee, people don't get registered. It's just these programs don't seem to work. I thought it was also interesting to hear from the representative from Senator Felder's office, and talking about the bill and what we know and what we don't know. And it seems like there's just a lot of questions about what this would look like. Why are they singling out New York City, for example? And why are they requiring children to register their bikes? It just doesn't make sense. I think this legislation is a solution in search of a problem, or certainly if we feel that there's a problem in our city streets, it is not the right solution for it. So I just would really strongly push back against this bill. I think it's completely misguided. I think there's almost no evidence suggesting it would help anyone. The last thing I'll say is there's been a lot of talk about, well, New York is different, right? New York is different from these cities. I agree. I think New York City, of all the cities in America, is the city best suited to be a bike capital. And let me just borrow some words from the former Transportation Commissioner, Jeanette Sadi-Khan. Over half of trips made in New York City are under 2 miles. Huge numbers of people live within a densely populated area. Our topography is mostly flat. We have excellent cycling facilities, including access on the city bridges. And our density is shown by the fact that if you look at businesses and how businesses are increasingly using bikes, it just makes sense to make this a bike-friendly city. I don't think registration schemes are bike-friendly. I think it's going to lead to disparate enforcement. I don't think there's any upside. I think the scheme is not workable. So for all those reasons, I would strongly oppose anything close to endorsing this legislation. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Billy. Okay, next I'm going to go to Paul Crickler. Paul?
Thanks, Chuck. First, I want to apologize for speaking earlier today. I hadn't picked up on the 30-minute thing, so I apologize for taking time earlier. I won't repeat what I said before. In terms of this specific idea, the summary is, in my opinion, it sounds appealing, it doesn't work, and it's got some terrible consequences in terms of reducing safety for everybody. What I really want to make a point on right now is, why are we even speaking about this? Catherine made the point earlier. There are 10 people in the last 15 years terribly killed by people on bikes in this city. There were 2,116 people killed by people driving cars or trucks. Less than 0.5% of the deaths of people caused by a vehicle in the last 15 years or by people on bikes. They're all terrible deaths. But if I was the relative of somebody who'd had a loved one killed by a driver, and I saw a local community board spending all this time, 2 hours right now, on this, when they should be doing so many other things in terms of our street safety, wider sidewalks for people who can't get around without a wheelchair when it's all blocked with scaffolding and sanitation bags, cycle paths that are away from the traffic so everyone's safer, that pedestrians have a shorter step across the avenue. Maybe a nice thing we could do, like put trees in and some side and some benches, make sure we have busways, lots of things we could be spending our time talking about. But people, please, can we stop talking about this? We've got so much else we should do if it's just about safety even. Thank you. And by the way, 3 people, as Devon pointed out, were killed in our neighborhood in the last few weeks. 2 on Christmas Eve, both in the Upper East Side, and 1 about 2 weeks ago. We should stop this, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Mrs. Brown? Yeah, you, Mrs. Brown.
Thank you. This is a tough discussion, and I support most of what Sharon had to say, but I'm speaking as an elderly disabled pedestrian. And unfortunately, we do need some type of regulation, monitoring, oversight, enforcement. Everybody, we have people who are automobile drivers, bikers, pedestrians who do not follow the law. And it's a concern. I don't know what the answer is. I think we need more discussion, but regulation is part of the answer. Being a person of color, I know how it would impact marginalized and people of color. So that's another concern to address. I know Citibank does a positive job, not Citibank, but City Bikes, a positive job in providing discounted rates to people in public housing. All of these factors need to be taken into consideration. But my emphasis is safety first. Whatever we decide, we must decide from a point of safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Elaine Walsh on this. Elaine?
I agree with what Alita and Michelle said. And I want to say it's not 20 years ago that we had people riding bikes. I've lived in this community my entire life, and I rode a bike when I was 10 on the streets, but I knew the rules. My concern is we need safety. I am upset that there is a discussion that this legislation or any discussion has to do with only focusing on people of color. The people who ride the bikes come from all ethnic and racial groups, and they all violate. And I must say, I believe that our messenger and delivery people are probably better at observing the lights than others. So I think we need to look at this. This is about a safety issue. As a pedestrian, I am no longer safe walking on the sidewalk because of the bikes coming or scooters coming at you from whatever end. And they are not minority people. They are white people. And I think we need to get off that tone right now. It is uncomfortable for me at this point. And I am a senior and I have a partner in a wheelchair, and we're totally uncomfortable now with what goes on the sidewalk. Yes, we have bike lanes. Some people stop. Some intersections have that little bike signal that says, left turn, not left turn. Some obey it, some don't. We need registration, licensing. People I know in Massachusetts, when they were children, said to me, they got a license for riding their bike. They were so proud to be able to be eligible and win that license. That's what the 18 or 16-year-old does with a bike. I'm sorry, a car. So this generalization about the negative impact of registration or the cost, if you can spend $1,000 or $2,000 on a bike, your $15 or $30 to register should not be part of the consideration. So I'd like to move forward. I agree with what has been said about the concerns, but I am a native New Yorker, born and raised in Yorkville, and I have never seen the dangerous situations I see, particularly on the sidewalks. It's not just the bike lanes, it's the ones on the bikes and the scooters and whatever else they all are that are riding on the sidewalk. And it doesn't matter if they're going east or west, north or south. It's uncomfortable and fearful. And I think for any of us who walk on a sidewalk, you should be feeling the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chuck, can we just let John speak as the last speaker since he hasn't spoken before?
I said Elaine, but John hadn't spoken. Why don't we have John? He is the absolute last speaker on this. Go ahead,
Thank
John.
you, Chuck, and I'll make it brief. So I waited kind of to the end of this debate discussion because there's a lot of points to be made on both sides. But I want to point out something. We have this very in-depth discussion about the advent of bikes and the problems that they do pose. Now, nothing is perfect. Everything is always going to come with some set of cost benefits. And our solution or the answer to some of the concerns that were raised were to add more bike lanes. Now, I'm not suggesting that biking should be engaged with less or more, whether it's safe or not safe for pedestrians, for traffic patterns, or anything else. It's also not clear to me that licensing or registering bikes are going to even make a difference. I mean, how do you enforce something like this? It's a bit of a mess. I mean, I think we're going to see a lot more bike lanes coming to the city. I think the more bikes that are on the road, the more possibility of injury or inconvenience is going to increase. And so unless we find something that is going to make sense, I mean, why even bother going down this road? The police, are they supposed to enforce a lot of these registration mishaps? We can't even get the illegal dirt bikes under control. And so, you know, again, listen to everybody and their passion with regard to their position. I don't know that registration is going to work, but I also know that as we increase bike lanes and bike usage, there's going to be more upset pedestrians in the street. So I guess I'll leave it at that and then we'll continue the discussion.
Thanks very much. Okay, we need to go on next. And this is a public hearing, which I'm turning over to Greg because it involves the Frick collection. And my firm has represented the Frick for a while. And so I'm recusing myself from this item. Go ahead, Greg.
Great, thank you, Chuck. So this is item 2. As Chuck said, it's a public hearing. It is an application on behalf of the Frick Collection for a new revocable consent to construct, maintain, and use an ADA ramp with stairs on the south side of the sidewalk of East 71st Street, east of 5th Avenue. Who is here representing the Frick?
Hi, my name's Richard Southwick. I think I'm unmuted.
Yes, you are, Richard. Thank you for joining us.
I will spend the next few minutes making a small presentation. I need to upload a small slide deck.
Yeah, go ahead. You can share your screen.
Can you see that?
Nope.
No. Okay. Let's see what I need to do here. Let's try it one more time. How's that?
1 second, it's loading.
And while it's loading, I just want to thank you and everyone who's here for this discussion item for your patience.
Hopefully this will be a little less complex than that very interesting topic you've just gone through. First of all, I'm Richard Southwick from Buyer Blue Bell, And I've been working with the Frick for a number of years, along with Seldorf Architects for the rehabilitation and work on the Frick that's now underway. I want to spend a few minutes going through a presentation. We'll spend, I have the ability to answer some questions afterwards. I also have with me Haran Cho from the engineer's office, who's been working with the DOT, and if there are any questions she can help answer as well, she'll do so. So why don't we get started? The presentation is about adding a accessible ramp to the Frick Art Reference Library. The Frick, as you know, is located on Fifth Avenue between 70th and 71st Street, right opposite Central Park. On the right-hand side, you can see its location, and it's in the Upper East Side Historic District. And everything you're seeing tonight has been, in fact, reviewed and approved by Landmarks. This is the building in question. This is the Frick Art Reference Library. It's actually the second one on this site. It was built in 1935. John Russell Pope was the architect, who replaced a earlier 1924 original Farrell building. What's really interesting to note that nothing's really changed in the last 85 or 90 years. The two buildings, at least from the exterior appearance, are the same as well as the sidewalk or the streetscape in front of it. Let's zoom in and look at just some photographs in a little bit more detail. The one on the left is the location of the existing sidewalk, and this will be the location of the proposed ramp. The ramp will descend from the sidewalk down to an existing cellar entrance. And we're going to modify that entrance. I'll show you some details on that. And the image on the right-hand side is the existing and actually a rather shallow door. And this will be modified to make an accessible entry. What you've seen before, and this goes back, so you can shake your memories. This goes back to 2018. Community Board 8 did in fact approve two ramps for the Frick collection. The first, which is on the 70th Street side, is a new ramp to get people up to the main entrance, and that's for the museum. This ramp is actually to get people into the Frick Art Reference Library. And the distinction is very important because they really are two different operations. They have different hours, different types of visitors. And we felt it was very important to have a distinct and dedicated entrance, accessible entrance to Farrell as well as the Frick collection. So this is what had been originally approved by Community Board 8 and originally approved by Landmarks. It's access from the west, going down to the door that you saw on the previous slide. As we've further developed the project, we sharpened our pencils, and I think we came up with a better version, really for three reasons. Access is still from the East 71st Street sidewalk down to the door, to the cellar, but we've reversed the direction of the ramp, so it's now coming from the east. First reason to do so is you come to the threshold of entering the Farrell. You either ascend the stairs or go to the ramp. So you're at the same decision point whether you take a ramp or a stair, rather than having one that's 35 feet away. Two, the overall sidewalk slopes up towards Central Park. So we decided to take advantage of the slope rather than finding the slope. So we've gained about half a foot of less slope, therefore about 6 feet of less ramp, because we start a lower point to get to the door. And the third, there's a Con Ed vault that's located to the west of this current design, and this can leave that intact rather than making any changes to it. You see in both of these diagrams two tree pits. Existing trees have been retained. They're has been no change to the trees, and we will work with New York City Parks for any further work with the tree pits, but we're leaving those intact. So we're really only talking about the ramp down to the lower level. I want to show you a series of 3 plans. This is what's there existing right now. The stair up to the main entrance is on the left-hand side. The existing door into the cellar level, and it actually steps down at the threshold, totally inaccessible. It's on the right-hand side, and you can see the 2 existing tree pits. And it's a bluestone panel or bluestone sidewalk. To effect this, we need to remove what's shown in a crosshatch. These are the bluestone panels coming up, and those will be modified and then reinstalled outboard of the new ramp. There'll be an excavation down to approximately 3 feet at the lowest level, and we will then reinstall the bluestone. The ramp slopes again left to right down to a landing that's approximately 2 feet below the starting point. There's also convenience stairs of 5 risers down to that same point. Door swings out for egress. It's an automatic opener. Therefore, if someone's in a wheelchair, they hit the tab, the door opens, and they pass through. I'm going to show you for context the plans of both the first floor and the lower level. Originally, you would enter through the door, stepping down, go down another 8 or 9 steps, and then work your way down to the lower level and get into the cellar level of the frick. We have, for a number of reasons, rearranged some of the slab levels and been able to effect a continuous accessible route down the ramp through the automatic door. At C70, there's a wheelchair lift, which will get you up to the predominant level of the cellar over to elevator E5. You ascend to E5 and you come out at the entry hall for the reference library. What this does effectively, it bypasses about 16 steps if you were to come both up the exterior stairs, and there are 2 other levels of steps here and here to get up to the main entry hall. So whether you're coming through the accessible route up the elevator or walking up, the main area to greet and to orient yourself to the building is in the Farrell entry hall, and that elevator opens up to that. This drawing shows a section and an elevation of the new ramp. Again, you're descending left to right. The ramp is a 1 in 12 slope, which is the ADA required slope. It's about 26, 27 feet to the landing. You can see the door. The door has been made taller by keeping the head where it is, but by lowering the sill, so you can now come straight in to the new slab level, and then the steps down from the sidewalk on the right-hand side or from the west. The design of the railing is a picket rail. I'll show you a few more details of that, but this is what you're looking at as you look towards the building. Some details of what we're looking at. On the right-hand side is a cross-section through the ramp, and the railing, the outside face of the railing comes out about 3'10" from the face of the wall. We need 3'0" clear for wheelchair or handicap accessibility. And what you're seeing here is a section towards the middle of the ramp as it's continuing to descend. We're adding limestone panels that match the finish of the wall above on the library, and also on the blind side, and continuing the bluestone paving of the sidewalk into the ramp itself. On the upper left-hand side, you'll see just a section of the railing. These are ornamental rails, similar to what we have on the 70th Street ramp. They're decorative profile with an extruded top rail, and then pickets spaced at 4 inches on center on 2 intermediate rails below the top rail. And it'll all be painted in a black enamel finish. The railing detail shows the profile of the top and also the escutcheon at the base plate. And then finally, last slide, there's a great tradition of ornamental ironwork and fencing and railings at the Frick. This picture from Fifth Avenue from 1915 shows the garden fence, which is actually wrought iron, not mild steel, but very similar with the same finish. And photographs of a much more recent vintage, actually 2 days ago, as the snow was melting in the neighborhood. These are all black painted wrought iron or steel fences on the block between Fifth Avenue or Madison, 70th or 71st Street. So these are the neighbors of the Frick on both the 70th Street and 71st Street sides. So that's my brief presentation. Be glad to answer any questions you might have or any clarifications. Craig.
All right, great. Thank you very much. So I guess we'll start as we usually do with questions or comments from the public. Just a reminder, if you do wish to speak, you need to raise your hand using the reactions button on the Zoom page, on the Zoom screen. All right, let's start with Adam Liebman Bailey, please. Can we unmute Adam?
Yeah, go ahead, Adam. Just hit the unmute on your screen.
Hi, my name is Adam Lightman Bailey, and I'm representing the 71st Street Homeowners Association. Mr. Southwick, you're saying that the ramp is for the library. Is that correct?
Yes, Adam, that is correct. We felt it was very important to have a dedicated ramp for the library for their separate hours and separate visitors.
Now, is the library open to the public where anybody could go in and take out a book?
Yes to the first part, no to the second.
I don't understand. Can you explain?
It is open to the public. It's not a circulating library. You can, perhaps by appointment with the librarians, talk about accessing the library, but I don't believe you can take it out like the New York Public Library.
Right. So my understanding is that only 10 people a year visit the library. Is that correct?
I don't believe that's correct. I could have the.
Okay, so my understanding is in the last 10 years, less than 100 people have actually visited our library. In fact, it's kept to employees only. Did you know that?
I don't believe that's true.
Okay. Next point. That elevator, for someone in a wheelchair to get to that elevator is extremely difficult, even with a ramp. In fact, they have to go from, and if I may, to the community board, I have prepared my own presentation, which will take about 5 minutes. If my materials could be distributed in the chat section, and I have a chance a few minutes after, I could explain this fully with my own diagrams of how difficult it is. Where if you have this ramp, you actually can't get to the elevator. It's impossible to get from the ramp to the elevator because someone in the wheelchair would not be able to climb the extra stairs in between the ramp and the wheelchair. There's another set of stairs that would need something else that blocks it. But however, Mr. Southwick, I didn't finish. Yes. However, there's something better for someone that's disabled, which is right across from where the elevator is, across the way on 70th Street, there is 2 ramps. Is that correct, Mr. Southwick? 2 ramps on 70th Street. Is that correct?
There are 2 ramps. One's a service ramp.
So wouldn't it be really easy?
let me
I'm
finish.
sorry, I'm in the middle of speaking. Wouldn't it be really easy from someone that uses the elevator to go right to 70th Street to get out of the building and in the building, to use the 2 ramps already there, approved by Community Board 8, to get in and out by using the ramps at 70th Street, and we don't need to disrupt any longer, which has been hell for the residents of 70th Street. The noise, the construction, the structural damage, which I'll play for you, and the pictures you showed are really nice, but they're not from this decade. But wait till I show you what I'm gonna, if Mr. Goodwill is nice enough to put in the chat section, what it looks like as of yesterday, how horrible it is, the makeup. But they could simply go, this best way is to take the elevator and go straight to the ramps that are already there, already in existence, 2 ramps that are already there. Is that correct, Mr. Southwick?
Let me respond to a number of your issues without interruption, Mr. Bailey. One, I think we don't want to mix the temporary construction condition with the permanent accommodation for those that may need an accessible route. There are 2 ramps on 70th Street. I will address that. One is a non-accessible ramp down to the service level, and the other is a ramp up to the entrance to the museum. That does not place you, even if the two facilities, that the library and the museum had the same operating hours, and they don't. Even if they did, it would place you in the museum where you'd have to meander all the way through, unescorted into the backside of the reference library. Your statement that there are steps to navigate is not true. This is a truly accessible, complete route, which brings you to an elevator and brings you up to the reception hall of Farrell. Thirdly, again, I want to make the point that you cannot, we know that construction is an inconvenience, and for that, it's unfortunate, but it's a necessary evil of doing this work and getting these improvements, and that will be temporary. This is a permanent, long-term, accessible entrance. ADA requires that you have a decision point at the main entrance so you can get into this facility. I'm making the point that entering the museum is not the same as entering the library. These are connected but 2 different organizations, and visitors to the library need to enter at the library, not at the museum.
That's a great point, but Mr. Southwick, aren't there, our engineers have found 8 other places where ramps can be put instead of on 71st Street, which is a very small street. Aren't there 8 other places where you can put ramps, which are better for people coming off that elevator than on 71st Street, which is tiny, already convoluted, already in disarray because of the construction, which harms the tree-long lot?
Yeah, let me ask a question. I don't believe so. And
would you like me to pull up my diagram to show you where they can go, or you already? Or I'm happy to do that right now. I could pull up. I could show you, or I'll wait my turn, and I can show you all the other places where ramps can go. You already have 2 on 70th Street. I mean, how many ramps, ADA ramps, do you need? You have, I mean, it's very disruptive to have a ramp coming onto the street because people can't walk over them. So you're causing people to walk into the street where there's a car parked. You have to go around that car. You're endangering their lives to go past the ramp because the ramp doesn't stop where you have it, which is inside. The ramp comes onto the block. That's how ramps do it in New York. So you have to go onto the street, endangering lives, children's lives, kids' lives, people in wheelchairs' lives. You're endangering their lives by putting that ramp where it is on a small street. How about 5th Avenue? You have a really large fence.
Mr. Bailey, if you could just let Mr. Southwick answer the questions. And
I'm sorry.
this meeting isn't intended to be a cross-examination, so would be appreciate if you can just ask your questions. in a more-
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Louder. Yes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
Okay, one or two comments out of respect for Mr. Bailey's questions, because he's very concerned about this. One, this is very similar to so many of the other examples that I just showed you on either side of 70th and 71st Street, where either ramps, stairs, or gardens actually protrude beyond the building line onto public property. Two, this is a 15-foot plus wide sidewalk. There's still over 5 feet between the tree pit and the railing. So no one would be forced to walk amidst the parked cars onto the street. New York City DOT and Parks requires a 5-foot clearance. We are slightly in excess of that with the tree pits where they are.
Don't have
And, New York. This is a national historic landmark and a New York City designated landmark, and there are it's a very sensitive building. There are only a few areas where we could, in fact, place a ramp, which would have negative or a minimal impact on the building, and certainly not on Fifth Avenue. And my final point is Community Board 8 has looked at this, and ironically, they had some questions about the overall project, but they approved both the 70th and 71st Street ramps.
No, excuse me. There's never been a ramp approved on 71st Street. They've been approved 2 on 70th Street. And the best place to put the ramp would be Fifth Avenue, because Fifth Avenue has the biggest sidewalk. That's the ideal place. The biggest sidewalk, because what's really going on here and why the Frick really wants it is they want to build the cafeteria. They want to tear down the library, tear down the elevator, and put a cafeteria there, and then have long lines to sell food because the Frick needs money. So what they're really trying to do here is put one over on a community board. That's what's really going on. So they want to sell tickets to they want to sell tickets on 71st Street, have long lines to ruin the beautiful block between Madison and 5th and 71st, have long lines. So on 70th and 70th, they already have the food trucks. Put it also on 71st instead of putting on 5th Avenue where we can have the lines and fit the people. That's what's really going on.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bailey, for your comments. I think we need to move on to other speakers. I don't know, Mr. Southwick, if you have any responses to that.
Just one really quick response. Even if the Frick wanted to tear down the library and build a cafeteria, one, I know that's absolutely not the case. They treasure that building. It's a John Russell Pope masterpiece. But even if they wanted to, they never could because of the New York City landmarking. So I just want to put that issue to bed, to rest. So why don't we move on? Thank you.
Craig, this is Joe Shatoff. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Frick. I just want to set a couple of things straight. We have an average of about 5,000 visitors and patrons of the library annually. That's a pre-pandemic number. So I'm not sure where these, these numbers of 10 over the last 10 years or 100 over the last 10 years are coming from. It's just not correct. And I also just want to say, we've been here to Community Board. We're glad to be here again tonight. Our architects and engineers have been working on this project for more than 5 years. We know the building, we know the infrastructure, and we appreciate any, suggestion that anybody would want to make, and we could find a forum for that. But, we know the building and we know how it operates and we know how to build on it. So that's where I'd like to leave that.
Great, thank you for your comments. The next speaker from the public is M. Granville. Can we please unmute?
Can unmute and please identify yourself.
Hi, sorry for the header. My name is Michael Granville, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm here speaking on behalf of the owners of 14 East 71st Street, the building just to the east of Farrell. And while the owners of that building, of course, agree that all of the Frick facilities should be accessible to individuals with disabilities, we object to this proposed new entrance for a few reasons. As a threshold matter, the ADA compliant access to the foral is provided, as the other speaker said, from the 70th Street side. We feel if another accessible entrance is desired or required at 71st Street, it can and should be made without imposing upon the public way or severely impacting the historic library entrance portico, as this current proposal does. As currently proposed, the new ramp is unnecessarily large encumbrance on this narrow street. At 37 feet in length, it coincides with 2 tree pits, reducing the walking space to only 5 feet there, creating a bottleneck effect and disrupting pedestrian traffic, all the more so if the sidewalk is now going to also be the location of deliveries coming and going from this newly expanded entrance. That raises a concern for my clients that this quiet residential block will see a serious increase in commercial truck traffic and idling and loading as this new ramped areaway becomes a back of house delivery hub for the institution, as seems likely with new trash storage and walk-in refrigerators for catering, all planned to be located nearby in the cellar by this entrance. And we wonder what assurances or commitments have been given by Frick that this entrance will just be used as accessible entrance for library patrons and will not become a service entrance for deliveries, changing the character of 71st Street as a result. We also feel that the new ramp and stair have not been designed to minimize the size of encroachment into the public sidewalk space. The existing cellar entrance door is now only about 6 inches below sidewalk grade and should require only a short ramp to accomplish the level change from sidewalk to landing. But the current design has, we feel without necessity, further dropped the level of the exterior landing by 1 foot 9 inches, accounting for 23 feet of the 37 feet proposed by the new ramp. If the current entrance door landing level were to be maintained, only a 6 foot long ramp would be needed, reducing the overall length of this permanent sidewalk encumbrance to closer to 13 feet rather than close to 40. We know that according to the project plans, travel within the building cellar from this entrance will already rely on ramping and a wheelchair lift to complete the accessible route to the elevator that the architect has referred to. We feel that incremental adjustments of those already planned measures inside could easily reduce the length of this ramp, eliminate one of the pedestrian choke points at the tree pits, and also move the ramp entrance further west, lessening its visual impact on the historic Farrell entrance portico. We feel that reducing this ramp footprint is readily achievable and wouldn't impose an undue financial burden on the project to accomplish, and would be an improvement in terms of the impact of this new ramp on the historic facade. So we're respectfully requesting that the committee not approve this proposal as it's been presented. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much. All right, next member of the public is Judy Schneider.
Good evening. I'd like to say that I think the ramp looks very nice and is quite elegant in keeping with an elegant building. And I think there's plenty of room there. That's an extremely wide sidewalk, even though there are 2 tree beds, and people will be able to get by. And I certainly would support this. I know that this community board is very concerned about ADA accessibility for all parts of the building. And if they were to enter on the other street and to have to go through the building and take a long time to get to the library, wouldn't serve any purpose. So I would hope that the board would support this very nice looking ramp.
All right, thank you very much, Judy. I believe that is all the members of the public. I think Joe Shatoff is here representing the Frick. I don't, unless you had something to say or you were looking to respond in an official capacity. Oh, we have one more public speaker, Dylan Geronimo Kennedy.
Hi, thanks for letting me speak. I just wanted to say that there were kind of two counter proposals that I heard offered. And I think that maintaining accessibility is extremely important, and that if there is a library, even if it's not the most attended library, it's important that people have access to it. I'd also say that the claim about it's not really a library because you can't take books out seemed a little extreme. I understand that not all libraries can do that. And there are parts of the New York Public Library that I've used as a researcher where I know I'm not able to take books out. So that's a normal library policy. But I will say when I heard the second proposal or counter proposal of just adjusting the length of the ramp, perhaps by not having it be as deep, seemed like a potentially compelling compromise. But I agree with the person who spoke just before me that moving it all the way to the other side of the building to make it a more arduous journey for someone in a wheelchair does seem unfair. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Does anyone from the Frick have any responses they wish to add now, or else I'll go to the to our board members?
Yeah, Craig, I have one clarification. One of the things we are doing by adjusting some of the slabs, we're keeping the head of the door where it is. We are lowering the door by about 1'9". The door is slightly over 6 feet, so it's really not even a legal entrance. There are a number of reasons why the slab level on the inside of the building is adjusted, but one of the reasons is to have a door that's high enough as well. Lots of planning reasons for the headroom required to make this a good, usable contemporary spaces inside. Also drove lowering the slab inside as well, but we did not have a legal door. If you looked at that first photograph, it's just barely over 6 feet high.
All right, thank you for that clarification. I see there's one more member of the public who hasn't spoken yet, and that is someone named Jennifer. Can we unmute Jennifer? And then I think we need to go to board members and be sensitive to everyone's time.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I had one question for Mr. Southwick, but I also wanted to just address the idea that there are 5,000 visitors yearly to the Frick Art Reference Library, which is a very specialized library that serves a very small population of art historians, researchers, and tradespeople. And if we do the quick math on 5,000 visitors, that would be 13 visitors a day, every day, that includes holidays. I've lived on 71st Street for my entire life. And I can tell you that I have never seen 13 people go in and out of the Frick Art Reference Library, especially not on Christmas, New Year's, Easter, Sundays, times when the library isn't even open. But anyway, I just wanted to make that note. I do believe that there are people that visit it digitally. So perhaps some of those numbers are conflated or confused because you're including people that are visiting the library digitally. I know there's been 2 grants that have recently been awarded in July. There was one for $450,000 and then another one in December of 2021 to help get to a place where you are digitizing the library, which is wonderful. And that will make the library so much more accessible for everyone, not just people that are trying to get there on a daily basis and are located in New York City, but people that are outside of the city. So bravo, that's wonderful.
Jennifer, can you just state your name? I missed your last name. And I don't know if you stated it, but I meant to ask that for the record.
Oh, I didn't. It's McBride. Sorry.
Thank you.
My question is, will the hours of operation for the ramp mimic the hours of operation for the library?
Simple answer, yes.
So then the library is open from 10 until I think it's like 3 or something like that. So the ramp will only be in use from 10 until 3.
I'll defer to maybe Joe Shatoff could answer that better than I can. It's an operational question, but if there were deliveries to the library going up the steps, historically, deliveries could either still go through the front door or down the ramp, as deliveries would have gone through that undersized door previously. I don't see that being the significant issue. I think the significant issue is finally providing an accessible entry into this building after.
Right. There is also an accessible entry, and I'm sorry, I did not mean to cut you short on that, but I saw where you were going. There is an accessible entry. There has been for the past 30 years, and that is on 70th Street. So I just to point that out, but if it is an ADA ramp, which we are all for, because accessibility is so important in our city, so much has changed. We need to make accessibility a priority. But then if the purpose of this ramp is for accessibility, then that should be accessibility during the library operating hours. And if you would use it outside of those hours, then that starts to question whether or not the purpose is truthful.
Yeah, it's hard for me to say that it would only be used for accessibility, but the primary reason for putting this there, the sole reason for putting the ramp there is for accessibility. Otherwise, the door that was one step down could have always been used for deliveries. And the FRIC never would have incurred the effort and the expense of going this route if it was only to get deliveries into that door, because the door, even though it's been enlarged to make it accessible, has always been there.
Right, since 1931, and it's always been sufficient for that period. So it just, it's interesting with all the other things that are being done to the building, that this is now also a consideration. I also thought, I appreciate your love of the building and its beauty, that I will miss seeing the 6 adorned windows from the Fifth Avenue view with the new building that is going to be placed in front of it and blocking that. But thank you for answering the question. That was really all I wanted to know, was how the ramp was going to be used.
Great, thank you, Ms. McBride.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Southwick.
All right, thank you. So let's now go to board members. I see first Rita Popper has her hand raised.
I think the architect really did an excellent job here, and that if that ramp only serves 12 people, that's 12 people who deserve to be able to get down to that library. The width of the ramp, we have a member on the community board who has an oversized wheelchair. And if she wanted to get down, she needs to be able to do it. Excuse me. I support this 100%, and I hope that the other board members do too. I think you did an excellent job. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Popper.
Thank you, Rita. Next, we have Alita Camp. Will you please unmute Alita?
Thank you. I do support accessibility. I think it's essential. I also support the FRIC. I think the collection is wonderful, the library, the programs for children. But I do have some concerns. One has to do with really the use of the ramp. And while I don't have obviously any concerns about the amount of time or number of visitors to the library, it just sounds a bit evasive about the kinds of deliveries that will be used. It's not so much into the building, but it's the ancillary uses of the street, whether there will be trucks, whether there will be attendant garbage, whether you intend to do what kind of catering events you intend to have. I must have missed the explanation about walk-in refrigerators flanking the door. So I don't know if this is something that's a little bit manipulative for the board when you really intend to do something else. And the reason I raise that is because my recollection, and I was very attuned to this at the time you came before the Landmarks Committee and the time you came before the Land Use Committee for variances, is that my recollection is that one of the reasons or the explanations for having to do what you were doing, including, I think, destruction of that unique music room and other changes to the reception area, was to have an accessible way of reaching the library through the museum. So given that, I don't really understand this, or what I don't understand, I guess, is the way it was phrased originally, which was that other building, I think the Annabelle Seldorf building, was essential to provide access from the museum to the library. So that's why I don't really understand this. And that's why it feels a little bit manipulative, because that point was really drilled into the community board and the public at that time. So that's one point. Then I'm just wondering again about the extent of catering and whether there will be some kind of cafe or cafeteria. I happen to really like the one at the Met, so I can't fault you for that, but I'm wondering about, again, the usage of the street. And then you also asked for feedback on the look of this, I guess. And my comment would be about the fence itself, which is that I don't see any decorative details. The fencing, the original fencing that you showed in your views is beautiful. It's embellished. It goes with the period of the building. This seems to go much more with the form of the Seldorf addition, with which is not at all embellished or adorned or anything other than really plain, a very plain look. So that would be my comment about the fence, is that I think you could do much better. And it's very utilitarian, which to me really detracts from the unique nature, the landmark nature of the reason the building is one of the reasons the building is landmarked. So that would be my comment about the fence, is that I think you could do better in terms of a look that is much more coordinated with the overall look of the museum. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Camp. That's a very interesting comment. I appreciate it.
All right, next we have Michelle Birnbaum.
Well, thank you, Craig. I think my first question is, are we expecting answers? Alita just asked a load of questions. Are we expecting a response? It would be helpful before I ask my questions.
Could Ms. Camp put that in a form of a question? I'm not sure what the...
I think she did.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the screen. There is a slightly more reduced but still elegant form to the posts and a profiled top rail.
Where are the posts on this picture?
Can you see the screen still, everyone?
Yep.
Yeah, the posts are approximately.
Oh, those
4
are the
feet.
posts? Okay.
Those are the posts, and then I'm going to scroll down very quickly to the detail of those posts. And the railing detail shows a tapered post, again, every 4 feet on center, an extruded, or it's actually a formed steel top rail, which is a very traditional classical shape. There are kind of classical rings just below the top, and the escutcheon at the bottom, which firmly anchors this to the ground. Then there are 2 intermediate rails. Those are the 1/2 inch by 3/4 inch rails with the required pickets that are necessary for life safety, and those are 4 inches on center.
All right. Well, the questions I would have liked answered that Alita Camp asked before I ask my question is, is it true what she said, and has a recollection of the fact that you spoke about accessibility through the other ramps when you made your original presentation and your rationale for the construction of the new building?
I honestly can't answer that. I'm not sure what was stated, but what I can tell you is service for any of the food service will come in through the 70th Street ramp, which has existed for many years, and will work its way to a service elevator, which is closer to 70th Street, and then up to the small cafe that's on the second floor of the building. So it would be a difficult route to get service, the food service in from 71st Street.
And that's true about the main entrance ramp as well?
There are two main entrance ramps, the existing, which has always been a service ramp and has been put into operation as a wheelchair ramp, but it's not a legal ADA ramp, and it does not leave you where you need to be. Therefore, it's very important to provide another ADA ramp, or the 70th Street ADA ramp, up to the main entrance of the museum itself. We couldn't do that here because once you get into the building, there are another 15 or 16 steps to get up to that reception area. There are four levels from the sidewalk up to the reception area in Farrell, which is why we are doing the ramp in a different direction.
Okay, what is the height of a compliant door?
6'8" is a minimum door height.
And what do you have now?
6'2", I believe.
You need 6 inches? You need 6 inches?
Well, it's more, no, but nothing in our business is that simple. There are many, many factors in play in terms of planning the building, and there were very compelling reasons to lower that floor slab inside to get functional space inboard that did not exist beforehand. So that lowered it more than the 6 inches.
Well, I'm just wondering if you can elaborate on that, because there is some validity to comments.
Absolutely,
to take this, you know, to 13 feet if possible versus almost 40. So if that is actually possible, it would have been nice to see Mr. Bailey's plans if in fact he can share them on the screen. But if that's all true, if these comments are true, then they're valid comments, and they don't have anything to do with whether or not we want to see accessibility. Everybody wants to see accessibility, but if you can have it with 13 feet of ramp versus almost 40 feet of ramp, I think that would be a good thing for the surrounding aesthetics and everything else. So I really want to just, you know, hold you to an answer for that. And maybe it would be helpful. Do you have interior slides? Can you walk us through the interior to show us what it is you're talking about? You gave us one which showed us the entering through the new automatic door, and then you saw a little flight of steps, and there is an accessible elevator next to that flight of steps, C70, which we're looking at now. That's all fine. But if you can show us why, you know, what it is that you need, why you can't work with 13 feet of ramp by taking us through the approach to C70, the entrance of the door. I mean, that interior line would be very helpful. And then if you could follow it towards the main lobby of the building, which the other ramps address, or they have access to, that you're talking about, that would be too convoluted to get to the library from those ramps. Do you have these kinds of interior?
Ms. Birnbaum, I only have what you've seen. I can answer a few of those questions. If we were to, first of all, the ramp is 26 feet 7 inches.
I thought you said 37.
No, let's go back. We'll do this one by one.
If you didn't, my mistake, but I thought it was 37.
26.7, that's the number right here. That's the ramp. Then you have to have a landing. The landing would be the same. You would probably eliminate 1 or 2 steps on the other side. So your ramp would start somewhere. Can you see my pointer somewhere in this area?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. So the impact would not be that different. You would still have a ramp and the railing across most of the extent of what we see now. The entire plan, I do have to say this with all due respect, the entire plan of this whole portion of the building also is not being driven just by a door height. There are many, many complex factors that myself and the engineers and a very large design team have worked through, which have come up with this solution. And the ramp, I will say, is the minimum size ramp that can go into this location. The 3-foot clear is what's required by ADA, no less. The 1 and 12 is what's the maximum slope for ADA. Fortunately, we're not beyond 30 feet, so there's no intermediate landing, but you do need a landing wide enough to turn a wheelchair, hit the pad, have the door open and go through. I can speak a bit about the route going through the educational center and through exhibition galleries, and it's a very long circuitous route to get from the 70th Street entrance to the point of the elevator that I had shown you at the E5 elevator. You know, this may not seem the most direct, but certainly it is a dedicated path that will get one to the same location as a more able-bodied person walking up the stairs. And it's difficult to argue against accessibility.
I just want to clarify one thing. Thank you. I get that. So we got that 30, if it's 26.7 plus 5 plus 4, is that where that number came from?
Yes.
Okay, I knew I heard that number. So, all right. Yes. So that's actually not the length of the ramp. However, it is the length of the fence. And that's what we were talking about. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. Next, we have Billy Freeland.
You know, can you hear me? You know what, I was gonna propose a resolution supporting this, but given all the hands that are up, maybe I should let others ask questions.
Okay, we'll come back to you if you wish to do that later.
Thanks.
All right, next is Barry Schneider.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. And Billy, I'm going to steal your fire. I move to approve the application for the ramp as proposed. And if it's seconded, I'd like to speak to it very, very briefly.
Okay, I see a second. I see 2 seconds from Rebecca and Billy. So
I'll be a little more than 2 seconds, but very quickly. I believe in Beyer, Blender, and Bell. They are world-renowned architects. If they say it's 6 feet 5 inches and 3/4 times 2, and whatever they come up with, that's the answer. They know what they're doing. They are experts in the field. We are, for the most part, novices, amateurs, and I think we have to rely on the expert of a world-class architectural firm rather than an attorney who represents a building on 71st Street. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Barry. Next, we have Sarah Chu.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation tonight. As a member of the Landmarks Committee, I would say that anytime we have accessibility and landmarks coming together, that it's always a difficult question, because of course we want to preserve the landmarks. They're a treasure. The Frick is a treasure to the city. But at the same time, we need to balance how we preserve these buildings with the dignity of the people who are of the public. And so tonight, we're here to take a vote on the revocable consent component of this design. And so I leave the discussions about aesthetics to the Landmarks Committee or in another forum. But if we're talking about specifically about the area of the sidewalk, then I think that the Frick has made clear what's necessary for a dignified entrance. Because it's a landmark, there are just um, we can't make accessibility be exactly the same for everyone. And I think that the 71st Street entrance is really important. I echo Rita Popper's comments earlier. Our community board member who uses a wheelchair, when we were at the blood center, yes, she could get to the blood center auditorium. However, if you've ever taken the ride with her through the elevator down to the basement, and it's a 10 to 15 minute ordeal. And if the elevator is not working that day, then she's got an even larger challenge and would need to depart the building in less dignified ways. And so I think to the extent that the Frick is designing ways to improve dignity for everyone who wants to go to the Frick, that scholars who are going to the library can get to the library, without having to go through a maze of the building. And in the event that one elevator is shut down, that there's accessibility in other routes. And so if we're going, we get these revocable consent requests for expansions of private use, and which I have my own concerns with, but the revocable consent is focused on greater access to the public and improving accessibility, then I think that, at least for me, the question is clear, and that I would support this. I would support Barry's resolution. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Next, we have Valerie Mason.
Hi, I just want to take everyone back to 2018. This project was very controversial, is controversial, and we did not approve this project, nor did we disapprove it. But the one thing we all agreed on was that we were focused on accessibility for many of the reasons that have been stated by other members, because we're extremely sensitized to it, because we have incredible board members who are disabled, and we're very sensitive to them being able to get in buildings as we are with everything else. And it was very clear in those presentations back in 2018 that the Frick was using accessibility and taking advantage of the accessibility that we were seeking for this building for the general public in order to try to bootstrap their way to get their proposal approved for the rest of the building. I'm a little bit shocked to hear that after all the time that was spent on this building, that now 2, 3, 4, almost 4 years later, you're coming back to us and telling us that even though the greatest minds of architecture were working on this project, that now there's a big hole in the project, and that the accessibility doesn't work. And as part of my remarks, I just want to say, I want Chuck, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, Chuck and Craig, but I don't think we did approve a ramp on 71st Street. We approved 2 access ramps, I believe, in the resolution.
Is it possible to clarify that?
Yes.
There are 2 ramps on 70th. One is existing, and then one proposed and one proposed on 71st. There has always been a ramp on 71st Street, and it was originally this ramp coming from the west. And when we sharpened our pencils, we felt having a different configuration made more sense. So this is always part of the project.
Yeah, okay. And I very much appreciate the delicateness with which you just said sharpening your pencil after, 4 years when the project was looked at the first time. I understand that things happen, but then, that you started off your presentation tonight, again, with the very great argument about accessibility. And then when pressed a little bit, you started out by saying that this was for scholars who are going to use the library, okay? And if the scholars before were going to use the library, and that the library has always been part of the Frick, I don't understand why the other entrances weren't made for their usage as well. Because then you went back and you said, well, you know, you can make a decision at the point of going up the stairs as to whether you want to use the ramp. I don't think that ramp is just going to be open for anybody to just use whenever they want, because as you mentioned, you have to make an appointment to come in and use the library. So anybody who is going to be coming to the library, whoever's running the library is going to know that that particular person needs to use the ramp. And let me say where I'm going with this really is, I find it offensive, again, that the Frick is using an accessibility argument to accomplish something that has nothing to do with accessibility. We are 100% behind accessibility on this board. And I want to approve this, but you know, it went from this is for scholars using the library, and to use your exact word, you said, and then you went back, and when Jennifer McBride said, oh, this is just for library usage, then nobody should be going there after 3 o'clock or whatever the time period. Then you said, well, now it's primarily used for that. So
I'll let Joe
Richard,
Shatoff
can I
answer
jump
that.
in here, Richard?
Yeah, I'd like Joe Shatoff to answer that as some operational issues.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Richard, I appreciate your comments, Richard. And, you know, Richard came here this evening to give a presentation. We appreciate that he's done that. I don't particularly appreciate the cross-examination that's being put forward on him. I just want to say that we've designed this entrance as an accessible entrance to the library. And I think that's been made very clear. We have a service entrance on 70th Street that can be used for deliveries, will be used for deliveries in the future. We're building this entrance at great expense. It's not easy to build in this area, as Richard explained. There's no ulterior motive here. Was raised earlier in the discussion about wanting to have a large food service or a cafeteria operation. We've always said, and this design includes what was approved, which is a small cafe on the second floor. There's no plan for a large service delivery here or anything of that nature. The scale of the Frick is a small scale museum, and it's going to remain that. There's no plans for major expansion in that way. So I understand that concern. I think it's quite reasonable, and I'm sure that we'll be having those conversations with our neighbors in the future as is appropriate. But I want to say certainly to everyone on the committee that this ramp is purely about accessible entrance to the library, and that, yes, is for scholars. That will also be for students who are visiting the library, for students who are accessing our education center from 71st Street. We don't want students, a student who comes to visit the Frick and an education program, for some of their peers to enter here, and for others of peers who may be using a wheelchair to have to separate from their class and go around to 70th Street and then take a circuitous route back to meet their classmates. It doesn't fit the spirit of the ADA law. So
Mr. Shatoff,
I just want to be clear about what we're doing and why.
So Mr. Shatoff, did you answer the question as to whether there were steps between that C70A elevator and the C70 elevator?
I don't understand your question.
Hey, Valerie, let's see if we can get to the bottom of that.
The neighborhood association said that there's a corridor between, when you get to the C70 vestibule, there's a couple of lines there in that corridor.
Those are not steps.
Those are not steps.
No.
What are they?
Sure.
Richard, I would presume that those are thresholds. You want to answer that?
If we're talking about where my cursor is, the ADA, the wheelchair lift is a lift to get you around that series of steps.
Oh, so they are steps.
Yeah,
So you're saying you have to
otherwise
take
you would not have the
wheelchair
wheelchair lift there. Yeah.
Okay, you have to take a wheelchair lift down in order to get around those steps to get over to the C70A elevator.
This is an old building, and many old buildings have many,
It's a
many
yes or no
different levels.
question.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I just want to make sure I'm reading the plan correctly. So
No,
all I
you,
want
no,
to
you can read a plan.
all,
You've done it
all I
correctly.
want to understand is this is a revocable consent. Is the frick okay that if we vote yes on this and we find that you're using it for things that are other than accessibility for disabled people, that you will agree to do something about the entrance?
Sure, that one's for you.
Well, yeah, we have every intention of entering into the revocable consent agreement with the city of New York. So, you know.
But will you put something in the revocable consent that if the community board comes back to you and asks you to close it, you will?
Why? And I don't understand.
I
don't understand the request.
I don't understand the, yeah, I mean,
I
this seems to me to be a very
okay.
long discussion about, you know, the operationalization of this space, which I think is a reasonable discussion to have. I'm sure it's one that we'll have with our neighbors reasonably, but I don't think it's not about the AD entrance.
Well, it is about the ADA entrance. It's exactly about that.
All right, I think, Valerie, I think you've made your.
I mean, I'm trying to understand if I can vote yes or no on this, because I'm not sure that I'm getting the warm and fuzzies from the frick that this is about ADA.
It's absolutely about ADA. If you're concerned, Valerie, let me see if I can clarify this again. If you're concerned about this being a service entrance, it has always had the ability to be a service entrance. The door still enters the building, whether there's a ramp there or not. The only, and I repeat that, the only reason the frick is putting this ramp in is to make this accessible at the library without having to walk all the way around or go all the way through the building from the museum on 70th Street.
Yeah, I think we've probably exhausted this discussion and need to move on to the next speaker. I think Rebecca Dangor has not spoken yet on this.
Call to question.
All right. Is there a second to that? Barry, I see, has seconded. Okay, so all in favor of calling to question? Okay,
Well,
I see.
actually, it would be more, we would put all the hands down and say anyone opposed.
Yeah, is anyone opposed?
Yeah, so let me clear all the feedback. Any who are opposed?
All right, and I counted a moment ago 18 members on here, so I think there is a minority of people opposed to calling to vote. So let's lower the hands, and I'm wondering if for this we should just go one by one just to make sure everyone's accounted for, given that there are so many people here. Make sure that everyone is still truly on here.
That makes sense. So I'm gonna lower all the hands and I'm gonna call on folks. I'll unmute you. Just announce your vote if you don't mind. And Craig, you'll record the tally, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna go in the order that they appear on my screen. And as you go, just please say you're voting yes, no, abstaining, or not voting for cause. So starting with Chuck Warren, please.
Yeah, not voting for cause. I've stated
Just
because
people.
My firm has represented the frick.
Thank you. I just knew somebody was going to ask. Craig.
I'm a yes.
Michelle.
Yeah, the reason I raised my hand is I wanted to know it sounded as though the applicant was willing to incorporate the what ifs that Valerie mentioned, like would they be willing to, answer if the need changed, et cetera, et cetera. And I just wondered if you're including that in this vote, because it seems as though they accepted
Hold
that
on, and
challenge.
we'll find out.
Is that true or not?
Craig, should I unmute? Who was it? Barry? Who?
Yes, you could unmute.
Yes, Barry.
Sorry, Barry. You made the motion.
Do you have a response to Michelle's question about including that?
I do not.
You do not wish to, or don't?
I do not wish to include anything, any conditions on the resolution.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to continue as we were doing. We already did Chuck. We already did Craig. All right. Alita Camp.
No, based on what Barry had just said. Thank you.
Barry Schneider.
Yes.
Thank you. Billy Freeland.
Yes.
Sorry. All right. Cause.
Yes.
Spagnoletti.
Yes. Yes.
Elaine Walsh.
No.
John Phillips.
I vote yes in favor.
Thank you. Lori Boris.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Lori. Lowell Barton.
Yes.
Thank you, Lowell. Michelle Birnbaum.
Yes, but I wasn't asking about what Barry wanted in the resolution. I was asking for clarification, is what the applicant said. Did the applicant say that they would be willing? If Barry doesn't want it in his resolution.
Yeah.
It's just getting late and we've still got, we're in the middle of the vote. That was a yes, right, Michelle?
It's a yes, but I still want
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Mrs. Brown.
Yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown. Paul Crickler.
Yes.
Thank you, Paul. Rebecca Dangor.
Yes.
Thank you, Rebecca. Rebecca Lamort.
Yes.
Thank you, Rebecca. Rita Popper.
Yes.
Thank you, Rita. Sarah Chu.
Yes.
Thank you, Sarah. Valerie Mason.
I'm going to abstain.
Thank you, Valerie. Did I miss anyone? I know there are a lot of people moving around. So if I missed you, raise your hand, please. And I apologize for that. All right, I'm not seeing anyone.
All right, and that would mean a vote of 14 yes, 2 no, 1 abstention, 1 not voting for cause. So motion passes.
Thank you all for your time.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, I guess we have one more, well, 2 more items, but this is a discussion about how to support restaurants that wish to participate in the permanent DOT open restaurants program, but are unable to do so because due to condition or due to conflicts with other uses or parking regulations. I'm not sure how far we can get on this tonight.
I was actually going to ask whether, unless there's anyone here who is specifically here for the purpose of discussing that item, whether we should just put it off until next month based on the time.
Yeah, I think we should, unless do we have anyone from the public that wants to speak about this? Yeah, Rebecca, I think Rebecca Dangor has her hand up. She's dying to say something on this. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Hi, I'm fine with putting it off to the next meeting as long as we address it, because I think it's important, based on what I said at the last full board meeting, that we make sure we kind of deal with the fact that we like suddenly switched our vote without really being responsive to the
Yeah.
restaurant owner who came
Okay.
before us.
Thank you, Rebecca. Alita, do you want to say something on this then before we move on?
No, I had my hand raised on the previous one, so I'll just say that's it. Thank you.
Thanks. So we'll put that on our next agenda, and we do need to address it. I agree. I know that Colleen could not make it because she's has to visit a friend who's not well at all. And but is anyone still here from DOT? I know he said someone might be. Is anyone? Do we know? Will, is there anyone here from DOT?
Let me check. Colleen sent me an email earlier of the name of the person who might be coming in her stead. But my computer's running very slowly.
I'm looking also.
Oh, Jackie.
Jackie.
And they are still here. Jackie,
Is
go ahead
that-
and unmute.
Yeah, Jackie, do you have anything anything you want to report on from DOT?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. First I want to say thank you to the board for having me. Colleen unfortunately was not able to join, but I only really do just have an update regarding our barrier beautification program. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but our art division is looking for artists and designers to propose mural designs as part of our 2022 barrier beautification initiative. And, this initiative would look to install temporary mural and design treatments along concrete barriers to protect bike lanes and pedestrian walkways throughout the city. I just wanted to, flag that for everyone. The deadline is February 13th. So if you know anyone interested, please, please encourage them to apply as the deadline is quickly approaching. And I will also put in the link for the application into the chat.
Thank you. Anything else, Jackie?
No, that would be all for me.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Is there any old business that people want to bring up?
We do have Judy as a public member or from the public, and then Alita and Kaz with their hands raised at this point.
Why don't we have Judy, mute Judy Schneider first?
This question is for Jackie. Is she still with us?
Yes.
Yes, Jackie, speaking of the barriers, could your group please look at the barrier on First Avenue under the 59th Street Bridge? Because it does need to have some repainting or cleanup on it. And we'd appreciate hearing from you about that.
Sure, and just to confirm, it is First Avenue under the 59th Street Bridge, correct?
Between 59 and 60.
Okay, perfect.
It's for the bikes to be able to pedal safely on the west side of First Avenue.
Yeah, definitely. I will flag that for our team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Next to Alita Camp. Had her hand up, Alita.
Thanks, Chuck. For Jackie, there's an arts committee at the community board that sent around the information about painting those barriers. But I think in the future for this kind of thing, it would be excellent if you came and we had some kind of meeting where this was more public information, because the arts committee mission is to bring more art to public spaces. And certainly what you're proposing through the DOT embodies that. So I'm really glad to hear this, and thank you. And then I just want to put in a plug for the small business committee. You were talking about the open restaurants. We're talking about how the city could help small businesses on Monday with the new chair of the small business services, as well as Julie Menon, who was just appointed chair of the small business committee. So restaurants, local restaurants, and small businesses that are not restaurants are all intricately connected. And it would be excellent to see everyone there listening and sharing ideas. So thank you for your patience, Chuck and Craig. I know it's late, but thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks. I think that's a good idea in front of the Arts Committee to hear that. Absolutely. Costs is next. Costs, can we have you costs?
Yeah.
Yes.
At the zoning, it was stated that DOT was going to come and they're going to be enforcing the open restaurants. Also, it was stated there there would be no new enclosed restaurants on the sidewalk. What was existing was going to exist. Walking around, there are hundreds of new construction going on the sidewalk, basically fully enclosing half the sidewalk or 3/4 of the sidewalk. Is DOT doing anything about it?
I don't know if Jackie has any knowledge on that. It's sort of like they change the tax law. It depends if they don't make them retroactive. Everybody acts ahead of time to beat the change.
Yeah, but there are no new enclosed restaurants, so they're illegal.
I know.
Are we doing anything about it?
You know anything about that?
So I would actually recommend either reaching out to Colleen or, through our DOT website and, submit cases and with those restaurant addresses so we can, look into it and send inspectors out there. I can also drop my email into the chat and you can please feel free to send any of those locations to me and, definitely try and get inspectors out there to review those locations.
Yeah, but at the same time,
let me see if I understand. What you're saying is people who have sheds out there that, or whatever they have out there hasn't been enclosed, they're now moving to enclose it. You don't know whether they got any approval to do any of that.
But there are no approvals for sidewalk enclosure, period. They would have to go to the DOT to build something on the sidewalk.
No, right. That's what I mean. That's what I'm saying.
And they're not. But also, I've reported several fully enclosed on the sidewalk. They're still there months, if not years, after they were reported. What's the use of reporting something when nothing gets done?
Yeah, I mean, Jackie, maybe you can take that back to your folks and see about that.
Yeah.
And
thank you. I would definitely take those back.
But my understanding, just to be clear, was that the permanent program isn't going to grandfather in permanent structures. It's not, they're going to have to be removed and in conformity with the new rules once the permanent program is up and running. Isn't that correct?
No. The permanent program, there are no new sidewalk enclosed restaurants. What is
sidewalk?
Existing?
Yeah,
right. No,
sidewalk.
Forget the street. No, this has got nothing to do with the street. The sidewalk. Okay. I'm not sure on the number of existing sidewalk cafes. They are grandfathered in. They've remained. Any new one is not. But when you walk around the streets, there are hundreds of illegal sidewalk sheds, fully enclosed, being constructed and have been constructed for the past 2 years. They will all be illegal. Now, these people have spent thousands of dollars building these. Now they're going to spend thousands of dollars removing them because they're illegal. So, I mean, we're creating a mess. The DOT is creating a mess.
Well, I talked to Ed Pinkar, and they're going to be coming to make a presentation when they've got the thing a little more fleshed out, and giving us time to look at it and make comments and things like that.
Okay.
And so that's one of the things I think that'll obviously be an issue, and so I think we'll have an opportunity to talk about that. And Ed said yes, definitely. Before we're going to come to you and you'll be heard on this stuff before we do anything, essentially.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Let's see. Valerie Mason. Sorry. Yeah.
Hi, I was just going to ask if maybe, we have a brand new DOT commissioner in Adonis Rodriguez, if we can extend an invitation to him to come to one of our meetings so we can perhaps get an idea of what his vision is for DOT, and also so we can speak to a new person and tell them what we're thinking about our community. I mean, I appreciate that Ed and Colleen are taking care of us, but I think it would be interesting to hear what his plan is and see how different he may be from the last two.
Sure.
Actually, Valerie, I invited him, or I sent an email to Ed Pinkar before our meeting in January to suggest that he attend one of our meetings. Actually, I was hoping he could show up in January. It was right after the two the pedestrians were killed at 60th Street and then on First Avenue. Of course, it was only a few days into the new administration, so he was unable to, but they are aware that we have an interest. So
oh, that's super. And then I just want to, I know we moved open restaurants to our next meeting, but we were at the last zoning committee meeting and we asked Gary Barnett to come to one of our transportation committee meetings, and he sounds like he's full speed ahead on his project. So I didn't know where that was going to play in our schedule.
As you heard at that meeting, I invited him. I'm not sure if they will be coming in March, but they are aware of the invitations out there, and I guess we can follow up and extend a formal invitation because I know that is a very time-sensitive topic.
Thank you.
Thanks. Billy Freeland, I see, is next. Billy?
Hi, yeah, this may be closer to new business than old. Would you want me to hold it or should I just dive in?
Okay.
It's all the same now.
Okay, so, we've been talking a little bit about accidents and fatalities and crashes in the neighborhood recently. We've had delivery cyclists killed, a few in December and January, and then most recently on January 24th, a pedestrian fatally struck at the intersection of 76th and 3rd. I thought the folks in the committee should know, and I gave this to Will if you'd like to put it in the chat, but Councilmember Menon sent a letter to Commissioner Rodriguez on January 26th. I think it's really important. It was a really good letter, and it's something I'd love this committee to be hyper-focused on. The letter outlines the recent fatalities in the district, in the neighborhood, including on First Avenue and then several on 3rd Avenue. And at the end, the council member writes, despite the previous administration's Vision Zero plan, our community needs additional traffic calming and controlling measures to protect New Yorkers. Therefore, I invite you and Manhattan Borough Commissioner Ed Pinkar to review these locations on site and immediately study measures that can prevent fatalities or injuries on our city streets. So I wanted to share that with the committee. I'd also, for Jackie and Colleen, just to make sure that's on your radar if it's not already. And perhaps us as a committee, or certainly our co-chairs, can get involved in that walkthrough with the borough commissioner and the transportation commissioner, because I think we all care a lot about making sure this neighborhood's safe. And it's been very alarming, to me, my mind, at least, the seeming increase in traffic violence on our streets.
Thank you. Thank you, Billy. Rebecca Dangor. Mute Rebecca.
Hi, I see Rita has her hand up. I was going to make a motion to adjourn, but I will hold off to let her say her final comment, but then I will reiterate my
Rita's the only other. Rita, can we unmute Rita?
Well, piggybacking on what Billy just said, is that those graphs that you had done about fatalities by month, by time of day, that we may be able to make an assumption about maybe the streets are not light enough, things like that. Could you send me a copy of those graphs and I can send you back what I think they say, given daylight, the daylight months versus the months that are darker, so on and so forth? Is that possible?
Are you talking about the things that Greg had done? That Craig had done, rather? All right.
Yeah, like you're referring to, I think, the crash mapper data, which I just have not had a chance to actually work on.
You know, if you just give me the graphs, I'll give you notes that I make, and then you could take it from there.
I was looking for what you were asking for and I couldn't find it, and then I think it just slipped my mind since then. So I just need to.
When you get a chance.
Yeah,
Okay?
I
I'll send you an email.
Yeah, no, you've already done what you needed to. I just need. I misplaced. I thought I sent you two separate emails. I only can find one that had the information, and I was looking for where I actually did the work. I need to just locate that.
It was what you originally did was by month, because by month is very crucial. And with Julie Menon talking about street safety, that these will help bikers.
Yeah, I recall it. I will fish that out from somewhere.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Rebecca?
Then I
Go
move
ahead.
to adjourn.
Okay, and I believe we are adjourned, and I thank everyone for the usual robust discussion, and sorry if we had to cut some things a little short because of our timing of some of the speakers, but I think it was an interesting meeting all around. So see everybody at the next meeting, which I think is going to be the, not our meeting, but the 9th. We have a land use meeting and then a full board meeting. So take care.